I'd like to call a special city council meeting for interviews of finalists for the vacant city manager's position. Would you please call the roll?
Gage.
Here.
Coos.
Here.
Zingy.
Here.
Matani.
Here.
Bradbury.
Here.
Gas.
Here.
Finnegan.
Here.
Severson.
Here. Please rise for the president's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ketchikan City Council would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional first people of this land in Ketchikan, Tongass Tlingit people. Under communications, we have information on the table to conduct the interview and some legal aspects to follow when you're in those questioning positions. Is there anybody to speak to the council today? Do we have anybody on this person that can be first? Thank you. Move us on to new business. Interview of finalists, candidates, and vacant city manager, general manager position of the city of Ketchikan. So with that, I'd ask Jeff to come up and give us a rundown on some of the stuff we can do, we can't do, and how we're going to proceed with this.
Sounds great. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate this council. Again, my name is Jeff Tyne. I'm a Senior Vice President with SGR, and we were hired to work with you on the recruitment for your city manager, general manager position. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and hopefully what we're seeing in some of the last steps of that process. Of course, we started in September and went through a process where you had the open recruitment period in September. After that, we did receive 44 candidates, and of course, I worked with all of you to start distilling that down. You had a number of candidates that you further asked additional questions by receiving council questions that we had answered through questionnaires, as well as undertook a virtual interview. And then from there, working with all of you to isolate that down to finalists that came here to visit here in Ketchikan this week. So we've had the opportunity and to introduce to you two different candidates that you've had as finalists. They are experienced local professionals. They in turn been able to learn so much about your organization, about the community, about how the island functions over this last week. And shortly you will be talking with Stephen Dahl. Stephen Dahl has over 20 years of management experience, much of that last 10 years in Oregon as a city manager or administrator for a number of communities. And this includes management of public utilities like water, wastewater, and electric services. And in addition, we have Keith Morey. Keith has 30 years of government experience, including in general management as administrators, also focus in community development, economic development, water, wastewater, and electric, and also did federal congressional work, as well as a chief of staff for a congressperson as well. Since they arrived, as we mentioned earlier in the week, had a chance to meet many of your staff, tour many, if not all, of the facilities here, as well as meet with Ketchikan residents at the community forum that we had last night, which was very well attended, and also to visit all throughout the island as well. They're very eager, just as I imagine you are, to talk with you directly, which I'm excited for that to happen, answer your questions and offer you some perspectives and interests that they had. So with you, you should have some information, but we've given in the past, so I imagine you're familiar, but there is a finalist packet that does include the questionnaire cover letter that you've seen before. Important that there's also some other information which we can chat about. One of those is the important legal aspects that you have for interview questions. So as Mary mentioned, we do have some interview questions that were based off of the feedback that you had provided. And so Sean Hart with the city was good enough to compile a great list of which you have in front of you that you would be able to ask both of those candidates. So just to give you a feel for that, to stay on track for the interview timing, I would expect that you probably want to stay within 3 to 4 minutes for each question. So that's something, Mayor, maybe you can work through if we're seeing that the questions are going a little long, but I would suggest that's probably a good time for that to work. Of course, if there are questions, follow-up that you have to the questions, that is something that is understandable. What I would caution you is that if it's a very unique question for one candidate, it would be unfortunate if the other didn't have that opportunity too. So please be very careful of things that stray too much from that. Also, this is important note on federal law. So as your attorney can remind you, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act does very specifically talk about hiring decisions of protected classes and the types of questions that you can and cannot ask. So hiring decisions, you need to really steer clear of questions on national origin, religion, disabilities, family and marital status, prescription drug use, as well as addiction, alcoholism, types of things that you wouldn't want to be doing in a public process like this, much less than any of the questions that you have. We will try to assist you as we navigate through that. Also in the packet, there's other information that's in there that we can talk about. But the plan is that as you take these interviews over the next couple of hours, and then from there, the mayor, if you wish, would convene to executive session to discuss your observations and then seek direction. And I'm happy to assist you as we go through that process. So with that, that's kind of a sense of the process. Are there any questions?
Yeah.
I just have a follow-up for Kim. I think I left my candidate binder that we received the other night in the chambers. I was wondering if you had any extras.
I can do it. I can print some.
Well, I don't know where I think mine's
Did
in
Jane,
my
did you leave
binder,
yours?
my
Yeah,
budget
mine
binder.
There. Oh, you bought the binder?
Yeah, it's in my budget binder. I just don't know where my budget.
Yeah, I have mine here.
My updated one.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to take it from you. I just. Sorry.
Any questions?
Great. Well, you do have, your first candidate is here, so whenever you are ready to take that process, if you would like to, I think it's scheduled at 10:30, but I imagine you can undertake it at your convenience.
Absolutely. I have no problem with that.
Oh,
So, Steve, come on up if you're ready. Morning, Steve. So, first of all, Steve, I'd like to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to the council. Please share a bit about your background, your professional journey, and any experiences or values you believe are important to us to understand as we consider you for this role.
Okay, my name is Steve Dahl. I have been a city manager for 3 small cities for the last 10 years in Oregon. The last one was Dundee, Oregon, where the focus is on tourism and the wine industry. And so we did a good, and there I was able to get $120 million of projects passed with the planning and building department. They haven't started building them yet, but they'll start building them in the spring when the sun comes up. I also worked with the Parks District to get a new park built within the city of Dundee, and worked with them on there. Before that, I worked in Drain, Oregon, where we had an electric utility, and I learned how to run electric utilities at that time. We were the smallest electric utility in the state of Oregon, and I got to meet the head of Bonneville one time, and basically told him my people can't afford a lot of the stuff you want. For fish and fish ramps and all that, because it stops the flow going through and increases the cost of electricity. And I found out later that, he was using that in, meetings. It's like, what's Drain going to do if we do this? If we do this, what's the cost to Drain? What's the cost of people who are averaging $35,000 to $40,000 a year in income, and which is really low for the state of Oregon. And before that, I was in Phoenix, Oregon, and Grants Pass, Oregon, and Southern Oregon, where we did a lot of road projects, and also got our known water loss from above 20% to around 12% within a couple of years in that direction, and negotiated with the Medford Water Commission and the city of Talent for reimbursements because of faulty readings and faulty meters and stuff that direction. So we were able to mitigate those. Before I started being a city manager, I was economic development in rural Oregon and also in Grants Pass, Oregon. And Grants Pass is also a tourism community. We have the Rogue River there, and we have a lot of tourism activities. I was able to create programs that would help people. As I said last night, giving to people, no one wakes up knowing how to run a business. They have to learn how to run a business. And so I worked with the Chamber of Commerce to provide quarterly training for businesses. For example, Dutch Brothers is, the head office is, or was located in Grants Pass. It's now in Phoenix and Scottsdale. But it was in Grants Pass when I was there. And so we brought in the head of marketing for Dutch Brothers to talk about how to market your product and accept the visitors in that direction. And working with the Chamber of Commerce to get that done, get that completed. Before that, I had, got a master's of management from Willamette University. I got a alternative dispute resolution certification from the Willamette University Law School. I did that because learning how to work and solve problems is the core of what a city administrator manager does and what management does. One of my philosophies of management is it is my job to help remove obstacles for the staff to do their job. And, that's what where I'm thinking about it is the staff needs to be able to, know what needs to be done, to know what the product is and how to work it and what the expectations are. And if they have an obstacle that they can't overcome or need something to overcome with, then we need to talk about it and how to get that problem solved. And let me see, the last thing, I have two philosophies I work with on a regular basis. In fact, I used to teach English as a second language in South Korea, and I came back with a sign that basically said truth and principle. And it became my trademark. I always tell the truth, and I always act in a principled manner. And the truth is really easy because I'm not smart enough to remember the truth and the lie. So I can just remember the truth and go in that direction. And when I act in a principled manner on a consistent basis, then people understand what to expect. And as long as people know what to expect and you don't have that wishy-washy, oh, this way or that way, people will respond to you as a leader and manager in that direction. So that's a quick overview of what my professional life has been and some of my management philosophies.
Thank you. Any questions? So Dick, we'll move on to you.
Okay. What do you think is the most important trait or skill a manager should have to be a successful and effective? And how have you demonstrated this quality in your career?
I think one of the most important traits you need to have is be able to work with different people and different groups. And to be able to do that, you need to effectively listen to them and understand what their wants and desires are and how they match your wants and desires as a city, as an organization, as an industry. And once you understand that, you can actually solve problems and move things along. An example of that is when I was in Phoenix, Oregon. We were putting a $75 million interchange on the outskirts of Phoenix that was changing how Phoenix was going to operate. And there were, when I got there, 5 lawsuits going on. 2 of them were resulting in what was happening at that location. And so within like a month of being there, I called the head of the ODOT, Oregon Department of Transportation, for that region. And I sat down and I said, hey, I'm Steve. I'm the new city administrator here. I'd like to come talk to you about this offering and some of the legal aspects of it. And so I was talking to the city attorney and I told him, yes, I have a meeting with ODOT on such and such a date. He goes, can I come with you? I said, sure, come on. And so we get there. ODOT has, 1,000 papers on their desks, saying, we're going to explain to you the detail. I'm like, no. Explain to me like you're going to a 5-year-old from the beginning to the end. So I can understand the broad concepts before we get into that system. And they were like looking at me going, okay, this is different. And so they started talking about what their issues were, what the project was, where the issues were. And we got to the point where the city and ODOT had a lawsuit going on, and the attorney and the head of ODOT were spent like 5-10 minutes talking about that. And I said, okay, we're not going to solve that today, but I understand what the issue is. And so we got to the end of the meeting. I was like, okay, I understand what the issues are. We'll work on getting to this thing solved. And I ended up, calling him a couple times and since I'm saying, and finally getting going, hey, listen, would you be willing to go through mediation with the city on this? And, we had a couple of businesses that were being affected by the interchange and they were, worried about loss and stuff like that. So we ended up having a 5-party mediation to be able to solve that issue. And a lot of that was just because all of a sudden, the first time they ever got everyone in a room to talk to each other about what their concerns were and about processes and everything in that thing. And one of the hookups with the city was, we were going to owe $10 million for the interchange. That was supposed to be, but it was going to be based on system development charges of people who were moving into that area for that because of the benefits of that interchange. But also in there, which the council never really got in their heads or whatever in that process, was the fact there was a 15-year time limit for that. So the city would take system development charges for the interchange for 15 years. And whatever was accepted up to $10 million, went to the thing. If we did not get that $10 million, we didn't have to pay the rest of it out. And once that became known within the city council and everything in that direction, we were able to solve the problems and, sign an agreement that was an immediate solution in that direction. So what I am good at is listening to other groups, other people, and what needs to be done, and understand how to work with them and how to make them look good and how to make the city look good and solve an issue. And that's really what I like to do.
Thank you.
Any follow-up? Ken Lee.
Oh, we're doing, okay. We're doing that one. Oh, let's see. We would like to hear your perspective on leadership roles. What are functions you believe fall clearly under administrative authority? What are examples of council policy making? How do you protect that boundary respectfully when a council member moves into the administrative space?
I firmly believe that the administrator is the boss of the staff, that they have the right to tell the staff what to do. And the council does not have the right to tell the staff what to do. They can as a council, but if you come into, for example, you see the water master on the street and you say hi and you go, hey, by the way, I need you to fix this for me on this thing. That's, telling you this, he should call me and say, hey, listen, we got this request to fix this on this particular thing. I should be able to say, okay, that's a priority for you, or that's not a priority for you. You don't get the right as a council member, as an individual council member, to do that. The council should be looking at the Broadway part of what the city responsibility is. You should be looking about, is our codes right? How do we want to spend money? Do we want to invest money in a new sewer treatment plant? What type of sewer treatment plant do we need? What type of studies do we need? What type of information do we want to have to make good, solid decisions and directional decisions? You should not ever get into the minuscule of how everything is running in the city. You can ask questions about it, and I don't have a problem with council members calling me up and say, hey, what's this or what's that? And I can look that up. I usually have a limit of about a half hour to an hour of research I'll do for a single councilor's request. And that's just because if I have to have 7 council requests and they make, one request a week, that's 7 hours a week that I am working, over 7 hours a week that I'm working on just a council request. I don't get other jobs done. I don't get the priorities of what the council wants done. And so that's why I pretty much say, you can call and talk to me. If it takes me more than half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour to get that research done, to answer the question, then that's something that needs to go in front of the council, and the council needs to be able to tell, this is what's important. I'll give you an example. In Dundee, I had a brand new counselor come in and say, I want a list of all the water leaks you've had for the last 5 years. And my response is, okay, why do you want that information? And he goes, well, this is good information to have. I go, well, what are you trying to find out from that information? Are you trying to find out our known water loss, where we've had issues and stuff like that? I can tell you that within about 10, 15 minutes looking at it on the computer. But to go back and go through all the logs of all the stuff that the staff has done for the last 5 years is going to take 5 to 10 hours minimum. And I figure that's going to be my director's time, and he's getting paid about $115 an hour. All of a sudden, it's $1,000 to $2,000 charge that I'm getting to do on one counselor's request. And if all the counselors get to make those type of requests on that type of thing, it becomes a $30,000 or $40,000 a month issue, you know, and you don't get that stuff done that's important in that direction. The council can direct staff on how they want to do that, and when I take council direction is that. But individual counselors don't have the ability to direct staff or necessarily, you know, they can ask for questions, they can ask for information, but if it's going to take longer than, you know, an hour to figure out, then they need to come to the council and instead the council say, we would like to have this information. I'm happy to provide it. I'm happy to get that research done. And I've done that a couple of times for when the council says, we want to know the history of this, we want to know the history of that. That works. But that's where the big part is. Again, the council's job, in my mind, is to set priorities for the city and set the framework, legal framework on how the city operates. You know, and that's where you should be looking into where you're at. And if you want to, you know, become, you know, a micromanager, you want to sit there and tell employees and staff what to do, then please apply for this job and, you know, take it over. Because that's, you know, because that's what this job is supposed to be doing in that direction.
Thank you. Any follow-ups? Riley?
Given the significant financial challenges the city is currently facing, leadership must make difficult choices to return to a stable and sustainable budget. The options are narrowed to either implementing continued substantial increases to taxes and rates, which we've been doing, or reducing the overall size and scope of government. How would you approach this decision, and what factors would guide your recommendation?
A lot of that depends, and the answer to that question is going to depend on what the citizens of Ketchikan want. And where I would suggest, and I suggested this last night, is I would suggest spending a year or something and doing a Ketchikan 2050 project, where you go into the public and you work with the public, and you have different businesses, you have citizens, you have, you know, tourists and cruise ships and stuff like that come in and say, this is what we think is the best of Ketchikan. This is what we do. And they develop a vision of Ketchikan for the year 2050, how it's going to look, how it's going to operate, and stuff like that. And that gives you a direction to go in. And so you end up, and what you really don't want to do is end up spending money doing same things over and over again. And so the second thing you really need to do is once you have that overall vision, you need to sit down and go through the different processes, like what's needed in water, what's needed in sewer, what's needed in the electric department, and figure out what those things are. Instead of being reactive, you can begin to plan and go after them and figure out, okay, we need to do this, we need to do that. You know, for example, in your sewer plant, you have to put, you know, start putting chlorine in that direction. Well, realize that's something that's going to be, that's the beginning of a federal government move to control more of what goes into the waterways and process that way. So the just getting the, you know, I forget what it is, the chlorine into the water, this is just the first stage of probably a project that's going to cost about $10 or $15 million and take 20 years to get done. And so we need to start thinking about those processes and where the traditional things are going on each individual process. And you have, you know, taking a look at, you know, your electric company and stuff like that. What do we need to do to make it work more effectively? Is there something we can do to make it work there? And is there costs that we know coming in? And we should have a, you know, 30-year plan for water, sewer, electric, and all the other utilities you have in there to know what you want to have in 30 years. This is where the things are going. This is where it is. And so you begin to plan and budget for that. And the second thing you need to do is you need to start budgeting for the emergencies. You need to start budgeting for the issues that you're going to have coming up. And you can only do that when you have that 30-year plan to know. You guys do a great job, and Public Works has a great thing of a 5-year budget of what the projects are and stuff that direction. But you need to make sure they're all working towards the same thing. So, you know, if, for example, I call it one of my management sins, is if you end up doing road work or water work on a road that you don't do, you know, sewer and underground, and then do the road work all at the same time. So for the next 10 years, 15 years, you don't have to touch that piece of road. But I've seen cities go in and they, you know, do a water line and they, you know, pave it over, and then next year they go and they, you know, do a sewer line and then they pave that over, and then they do something. I mean, and so they touch that piece of line 3 times in a row. And so one of the things I did in Phoenix is we were served by Rogue Valley Sewer there, and we were going to do a major water and road project in a section of town. I called up Rogue Valley Sewer and said, hey, are you guys planning on doing this work anytime soon? And they go, yeah, well, we have it due for next year. I go, well, can we do it this year? And they're like, no, we don't have it in the budget. And I go, well, are you willing to have us pay for it up front? And then on it, because Oregon is a July to June budget. And then July 1st, you can pay us back. And I go, yeah, we'll do that. And so we ended up doing this road project and, water project and sewer project once. And then it got done and it got completed and they haven't had to open it up for anything else. And so those are the type of planning and stuff. So when you have those plans together and you know how they work together, you can sit there and say, okay, are there joint projects we can do here? Are there joint projects we can do there? How we work together, as a group. And, the same thing, you can sit there and take a look and say, okay, is there machinery we can look at? And that is used by all the different departments. And so we don't have to have a back truck for the water department. We don't have to have a back truck for, the sewer department. We have a back truck that can handle all the type of digging issues that we have in the city. And those are only things that you can have when you actually have the long-term plans together. And then you have the plans for transportation and vehicles and all the other equipment that you have also together and know how you allocate them responsibly in that direction. And the third thing, I'll just say this, right now and get myself in trouble. You need to start monitoring your water, and you need to do it down to the individual level. Because if you're not thinking about doing it now, you'll have to do it in 10 or 15 years because that's the way things are going in the lower 48 and in Oregon. We're getting to the point where we can't have a known water loss of over 10%. And so, and if we do in about 10 years, if we have a known water loss of over 10%, you're probably going to end up being fined. And that's where the legal stuff is going for in that direction. That's a quick overview of some of it.
Thank you. Follow-up.
Your Honor.
Can you?
When you talk about metering, are you talking about just monitoring for water loss?
No, I'm talking about you have to figure out there is a cost for the city to get water from the lakes to your house.
Yeah.
There is a set cost for that. That house should theoretically pick up the cost for doing that. Because they're getting the steps of it. It's like, why should your neighbors or the business down the street supplement you for that process of something that you use? And that it's a city resource. I mean, think about it this way. Supplying water is a city business. It is an enterprise business. It is supposed to cover its costs. If it's not covering its costs, you're giving stuff away. And you're not going to have Walmart give away stuff except to get them in the door. You're not going to have, Amazon is going to charge you for whatever they're going to send you, So why are you giving water to customers, that use it? And so that's one way of looking at the situation. And I argue that that's what you guys need to do. Maybe not next year, but in the next 5 or 10 years, that's what you should probably be looking at. Because that's, again, you're going to have enough money to come in and cover costs. And you're not giving general fund money to something that should be have its own way of doing things. It's been covering its own costs.
Follow up.
One follow-up, then, yeah.
So right now it's a flat rate metered water rate for residents. How would you see addressing the graduation of an entire community to that system?
Education, going out and talking to people,
Okay.
having public meetings with this saying, this is what probably a more detailed thing that we did in Dundee, but we raised water rates substantially because we hadn't raised them for 5 years in the last year in Dundee. And we had at least 5 public meetings on it. We took the top 100 users of water and said, these are our 3 different locations that we're looking at for the cost. We did a water cost study, so we know exactly how much it costs to get water from, we pumped all the water from the pump to someone's house. And so we were able to say, these are the costs we have, this is what we have here, this is what we have that process in there. And so we spent the time talking to the city. We spent a good 8 to 9 months talking to the city and saying, this is what's happening here. And we only had one person after we got it implemented come to the council meeting and say, you're biased against people with large lawns. And it's like, well, I didn't realize large lawns were a conditional or status or tax that on that. But basically sat there and told them, okay, sorry, this, you're using that water. And it's a cost to the city, it's a cost to get that water to you. And you also need, when you figure out those costs, so this is one of the things you're not doing right now, you're not covering the expenses that are coming up with that. You're not covering line removals, you're not covering, all the other parts of having to run the water system. And that's, and you need to be able to, when you have these enterprise zones come in, have enough money to cover the cost of what you're doing that day, but also have enough to invest in making the system better and working in the future. I like to take a look at it, if you do a graph, and you have basically, the line graph, if all the costs, everything go, you have a nice easy cost. You can have those type of ways of doing costs and expenses, or you can do the hockey stick. With the hockey stick, if you keep everything at one level for a long period of time, and then all of a sudden you have to spend a lot of money to do it, so you raise everything all at once. And people are more understanding if you explain it to them and say, this is what's going on, we're doing this, and we're trying to prevent that hockey stick. So we're trying to prevent from going from like $20 a month in water fees to $500 a month in water fees. And that's just kind of how it kind of works. And it's the same thing for all the other enterprise zones. I think you have in that direction. That's
Yeah,
my
you have
recommendation.
something?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm just gonna realize, so we do have a number of questions, so I just want to make sure about 3 to 4 minutes per question would probably be opportune. We'll kind of watch that piece on our answers, but I just want to make sure you're able to get through it.
Thank you.
I can do this all
Jay.
day, so.
Jay,
Thank you, Your Honor. In conjunction with Mr. Gass's question, during preparation of budgets from different departments, as a leader, as the manager, they eventually come to you with what their requirements are in the budget. And running in a deficit continuously, how would you mitigate the asks from the needs? And how would you come up with a budget that is realistic in that sense? Because in every department, and even in businesses, they've always asked above needs. But being in a deficit, how would you take off the asks and stay with the needs?
First, you have to know what the needs are. And how can you know what the needs are without knowing and doing a study and say, okay, this is what's happening, this is what's here. Again, when you take a look at what the cost of something is, and well, let's go it this way. In Drain, we did not have a what I call a mule, which is a vac truck, and it was also a sweeper. And so, where do you want to spend your money? You can get we had water, sewer, and electric all put in $100,000 in there and got that done to buy that, sweeper. Yes, it was an ask, but it also saved us over, in a 5-year period, it saved us over $750,000 in cutting the labor costs because they were able to get stuff done quicker and better and in that direction. So how do you sit there and balance those two things? You have to know what your absolute minimum needs are. And then you also have to make sure that you're, having a little bit over that to cover the cost of what's coming up in the future. Even businesses, decently run businesses will have a planning where, okay, we make, it costs us $10 to provide X service. Well, you're going to charge them $12 for that. And that $2 is going to go back to keeping everything together so we can reinvest in that community. We can reinvest in that product. We can reinvest in that thing. There's a difference between spending money and investing money. And you need to know where you need to invest the money. And one of the things you need to do is understand where the issues really are. And that's why I encourage those studies. So you can sit there and say, okay, the issues are here. The issues are here. This is what we don't necessarily need here. And you can, based on what the long-term benefit of the city is and what the goals of the council are. Because again, when I'm doing budgets, one of the things I'm looking at is what is the goals of the council? Has the council come up with these 5 or 6 goals that we want to see happen within the city? And how do we develop that? And so every budget item, every budget line and stuff should be related to a council goal in that process. And that's kind of how the process works in my head.
thank you. Yes,
through this answer, you spoke a lot of future planning and studies, which as we all know, as here at the table and in government, we're talking a long time to get to that point. You're walking into a large deficit right off the bat that decisions have to be made. So going back to the original question in the current structure or financial situation with not a lot of time, what would be, your recommendations what factors would guide your recommendation in the two options that were presented? The substantial increase of tax rates or, overall scope of government? Because we don't have time. Well, we do have time for some aspects, but not all of them.
Okay, let me answer it this way. You can sit there and say, what is survival? I mean, you're $1.4 million off in your sewer fund. I don't know how the hell that happened. I'm sorry. I don't know, but there is no reason you should have gotten to that point. That's beside the point. What's the minimum we can do to keep our, there's certain state laws and certain regulations regarding sewer. I would take a look at that. Okay, what's the minimum we can do right now for the next year to cut those losses out and to keep that going? And, if I have to lay off people in that apartment, fine, or whatever, in, that direction, but you need to figure out that part of it. And then you have to do a combination probably of, do I lay off somebody? Do I cut, things? But there are but with the sewer, there's a state law and a federal law of what is you have to provide for that. And I would go down to that very basic part of it. What is the part that needs to be done? And then I can build off of that. Is what it was doing that. But also we just have to, again, if I'm getting down to that low, I'm coming to the council and saying, we have to budget for above that. You can't just budget, it's like, I'm gonna make up numbers. Say that it's gonna be a $2 million budget for the sewer department. All right, and that's gonna be the minimum it has to have things work. All right, I'm gonna say, you're gonna have to come in and budget, cost-wise, $2.5 million. Because if we're just gonna get in survival mode, if you just want to be in survival mode, you're gonna doom the water department or the sewer department to that for the rest of the career. And that's not what you guys want. That's not what the city, I'm convinced the citizens want within the city of Ketchikan. So you need to start figuring out, okay, go down to survival mode. This is the minimum we can do, but you also have to budget higher than that to be able to get a little bit of money to be able to move forward. And if you're not, willing to do that, something like that, then that's a different issue. And that's a more serious conversation. But that's how I would handle that coming in. That's what I'd look at.
Thank you.
So, Jack.
Good morning, Mr. Dahl. Please share a recent failure or initiative that did not pan out as planned. Why do you think this occurred? What lessons were learned? What would you do differently if given the opportunity to try again?
Okay, one of the issues in Dundee was we're running out of water, and we needed a new source of water. They run by basically five water pumps that we get water from the aquifer up in that way. And so my thought at that time was, let's work with a nearby city, which is Newburgh. And I talked to their city manager, and we talked about different things, and we said, let's try and see if we can get they were looking at building a new water treatment plant. And so let's figure out what we can do to, buy into that water treatment plant. And so we came up with an idea and solution, to how to do that. And, we were able to buy into that water treatment plant for like $12 million. And which, again, I figured out how to do it and how to afford to do that. It failed because I hadn't adequately convinced the council this is what needed to happen. And it was too short of a timeline to make that work effectively. I mean, we tried to do this within I think 5-month thing, and it should have been a 1 to 2 year conversation. And all the different details and everything worked out in that process. And so ended up not happening. And then Newburgh ended up not, building it because the water plant went from a $40 million water plant to a $120 million water plant. And, they had a whole bunch of issues on that side in that direction. But, but it failed because we didn't do the proper, education talking about what's going on, why we're doing this and everything in that direction. And about a year later, I don't know, can't remember what the technical name are, but we had like PFAS, which are forever chemicals that are in 90% are going to be in most of the water systems. You do not have that issue here at all right now. And so we had two of our wells test positive for that. And so with that, we started talking about this is what we need to do, educating the public on what's going to happen. And we didn't have one person show concern or call the city saying you're killing us with our water and all this other stuff that happens with that direction, because we were able to explain it and spend more time explaining to things and talking about how we're going to solve it and all the issues associated with solving it and the filters we'd have to put in and that. And that took about a year and a half to get the funding and explanation to the council and to the community on that one, and we didn't have any pushback on it. So again, it failed because it was too short of a time frame for such a big project to happen in that direction.
Thank you. So new leadership can certainly create disruption to an organization. How would you go about establishing trust with a team during your first few months? What specific steps would you take to build credibility and rapport? And how would you carry forward your observations into the work as city manager?
I would spend the first 2 or 3 months talking to people. I've already spent, 2 days, a day and a half talking to your executive staff, listening to them and what their issues are and what they need and, what their concerns are. So that's a good start. And you be able to build trust by them by showing, okay, I will do X or I will talk to the council about Y, and then you follow through on it and make sure it's done. And also you need to build trust by recognizing the hard work that's happening right now within the city and what your city staff is doing. I mean, your water foreman is a great guy, explains water like you wouldn't believe. And I was listening to him talk yesterday, and I'm sitting there thinking, we need to videotape this and put it on the website, because this will explain how water is operated within the city of Newburgh. And give them a chance to come in and explain what's going on, and you give them a chance to do it. But a lot of it's just talking to them, understanding what their issues and what their concerns are, and and linking it back to what the council wants to achieve. Because you guys are the different sides of the same coin. If the city of Ketchikan is going to succeed and be successful in the future, you guys need to be working forward and together as a group, and the council and the staff needs to believe in what you're doing and report in that group. And they have to have that type of communication, that type of trust. And it's my job to be able to provide that link between those two things and work in that process. And so, again, most of it is reading what you guys have done in the past and talking to staff to know what's going on, talking to council to know what their goals and options are, and knowing how they fit together and working them to get things done.
Thank you. Judy.
Good morning, Mr. Dahl. Ketchikan's a beautiful community, unlimited outdoor recreational opportunities, but we're also a remote community with very limited access to what might be considered normal. Amenities like shopping, a plethora of restaurants. We measure rainfall in feet and experience long, dark winters. We want a city manager who is very certain that our community is a good fit for him or her. We want someone who will stay for the long term and make this their home. Why do you believe you have that staying power?
I grew up in places like Ketchikan. I was born, and the first place I remember living is in Trout Lake, Washington, which was 25 miles away up north of the Columbia River Gorge and about 65 miles from Portland and that direction. I moved from there to, Granite County, Oregon, and Dale, Oregon, where I had to travel 25 miles to and from school each day and work in that direction. I've lived in rural communities, and I've lived and worked in rural communities in most of my career. It wasn't until the last 3 years that I worked in an area that was 35 miles from Portland, or in a community that had more than 3,000 or 4,000 people in it in that direction. So I'm used to this type of stuff, and the weather. I lived in Korea where it pours down rain for 3 months and then it's 105 degrees for 5 months. So you get used to whatever the process is. And I've lived in that direction and I've worked in that direction. And, I've, I've lived in the, and when I was in Grants Pass, I lived in the fishbowl where almost everyone in the community knew who I was. I mean, I had dinner one time with the head of Small Business Development Center, and we hardly ever got through dinner because every other person was stopping by and say hi to us. Say, hey, what's going on? What's going on here? And stuff like that. I also learned in Eastern Oregon that to do my shopping early on a Sunday morning, if not, I get stuck in the grocery store for 3.5 hours asking questions. Because go down the aisle, half the people go, hey, Steve, I've been meaning to ask you about this, or I've been meaning to ask you about that. And I realized this is part of what being in a small community and the outside community is. Have I lived in anything as strictly as remote as, Ketchikan? No, I haven't. But I've lived in places close enough that I think I understand what the issues are and what it's like to live in a community like this. And it's a beautiful community. And a lot of what I do for fun is based on, where I'm at.
Thank you.
Abby?
Describe a time when you developed and implemented a long-term strategic plan in a complex organization. How did you align resources, manage competing priorities, and measure success over time?
Well, in Grants Pass, when it comes to me, is I did a long-term strategic plan for economic development growth in that community. And, there I worked and looked at partners and how to get partners to work together. So we didn't have competing areas that we overlapped each other. And we knew what each partner did and how to work together. And we had, worked in that process in that direction. And so a lot of it was just, sitting down and writing up the plan, writing up, what the goals are. Again, what's the goals of the council becomes evident in that direction. The council, for this case, the council view themselves as a community that people are going to come up here and move into California, or are we going to help, the businesses we have locally grow and expand? And, the council at that time said, well, let's do the grow and expand, because that was, again, Dutch Brothers, a couple other major companies were there, and we can help them do that. And so we were able to focus on that process based on what the council's goals were in that direction. Again, when you're taking it, we're doing, in Phoenix, we started the Urban Growth Boundary Project. And Urban Growth Boundary in Oregon, about every 20 years, each city has to go through an examination of its urban growth area. And if we can bring more area into that, if we're limiting ourselves out of the area, for example, we take a look at what's happening within the community and sit there and say, okay, you have, an housing issue, or you have an issue with industrial land, and you can sit there and examine what is happening in there. And then you develop a plan for how to grow the city for the next 20 years. And there you sit there and have public meetings, and you listen to what the public wants, and you listen to what the issues are, and you listen to what state laws are and what the state rules and regulations are to make sure you're fitting in all of that. And then you bring that to the council and listen to the council's ideas on what's going on. And so you basically balance what everyone's competing projects are on. I always like to do what's the cost benefit analysis of it. If we spend X money on this, what's the chances of Y happening? And that sort of thing. And so, what I try to work into is like, if we, do a master plan on the water thing and start working on the water, we know that for every dollar we invest, we'll be able to get $3 back in revenue coming from that direction, as long as we have good water and good systems in that direction. So that's another way I look at it.
Thank you. Jay?
Thank you, Your Honor. Discuss your approach to communicating with the council, especially in preparation for council meetings. How will you make sure that we are well informed and that our interests are being addressed?
Well, I like to have a conversation with council members on a regular basis. Usually, no less than twice a month. Just sit down and say, hey, what's going on with, this. I like to get the council packet out a week ahead of time. I don't know if that's possible. working with the clerk and stuff, we can get that out a week ahead of time. And I encourage the council to read the packet and ask questions ahead of time. So if you sit there and read the packet and sit there and say, okay, this is what we're talking about here, this is what there. If you have a question, you can give me a call. And so we can get that prepared for, the answer that prepared for you at that meeting. What I don't particularly enjoy is when you have a serious question. And again, I don't mind serious questions at the meeting and, not have time to prepare what the answer is. That's why I like to talk to the council ahead of time and find out what their concerns are. I'm not sitting there, having, 2 or 3 counselors together and making a decision at that time. It's just like talking to you on the phone, or I grab a cup of coffee with you and say, hey, what are the concerns for this week's council meeting or next week's council meeting? What's your concerns? What are you hearing from your constituents about what's happening within the city? So you have an understanding from your perspective of what you guys' priorities are and stuff. And I can sit there and tell you, oh, by the way, we have this going on and we have this going on. One thing there's 2 things I always try to provide at least once a month within the city is I like to take a list of your council goals, and your council goal should be no more than 5 or 6 items, and show and give you an update every month of what we are doing to get your council goals going. I also would like, every month I like to give you the receipts or the budget line items and stuff for the budget every month, so you can understand where the money is coming from, where the money is going, and what we're spending it on, and so you can have those types of things to look at it. Usually that's a month later, so you get January's in March and stuff like that, because you want to have all the income, all the expenses accounted for in that process. But that gives you an idea of where you are all the time in that process. And again, I'm always open to have conversations. If you need to talk to me 2 or 3 times a week, that's what it is. I can handle that part of it. But that's how I try to can do and work with the council in that direction. And again, I've had counselors call me up and say, hey, what's going on? And I'll sit there and tell them. It's, again, transparency is also with the council and with everything. Everything I do is transparent as much as we possibly can, unless we're dealing with a personnel issue. I prefer to keep those unless it becomes a legal issue under wraps, or maybe I'll tell you personally, but I won't bring it up in a council meeting because those are have some legal requirements to stuff with it. But that's kind of how I work with council.
Thank you. Yeah.
Have you managed or been part of an organization that was struggling financially? What steps did you undertake, and did you place the organization in a stronger financial position?
Every city I've worked for is in financial duress. And so, yes, I believe I've left each city in a better position for that. A lot of that has to do with what I call, I'll usually describe it this way. There are things you can do a little bit to get what I call backburns. Because if you have a forest fire and what's going on in that direction, you have a fire coming at you and it's overcoming the lines and stuff like that. What you can do is go up here and do a little backburn on it, get rid of the trees and the stuff that can catch fire later, and work in that direction. And so what I try to do is create backburns on certain things, on issues like water and sewer and payroll and that sort of thing, so that we can deal with that at that time. And so when the fire comes over and sort of hits that backburn where we've already dealt with it, it sort of stops and dies, and we get up moving forward in a little bit different directions. And one of the issues that we had, it wasn't necessarily a financial issue when I took over Dundee, is the city had just spent $200,000 on a harassment lawsuit and basically lost, but it hadn't solved the issue. And they got rid of the manager that had caused that harassment. We hired a new manager, but the fire department staff was still hurting from that. And so I was able to come in and, my first meeting with them in the union negotiation was, hey, I'm sorry about what happened to you. It's unconditional. It should have never happened. And I don't know all the details with it, but it was wrong. And so we were able to address that issue up front and move forward. And that, again, talking about building trust, there's no trust in that. In Drain, we had $3 million in reserves for the electric utility. And so, what I did there is we began to, be nickel and dime on things in that direction. So what we did is like, okay, I'm gonna take $1 million here that we have and get these projects done. And then rebuild the option again on doing this. And we did that without raising money because we were able to use the revenue stream in the past in that direction. You know, now when the city has actually gone broke, or it was in Dundee, I was doing the budget and we were around $350,000, $320,000 short in the general fund. And this was like 2 or 3 months before the budget process there. So I went to the council and said, this is what we're short on. What are your concerns are? This is where the money's coming from. This is what we can spend it on. This is what we're doing, and this is what our goals are. Where do you want to cut? You know, and I brought it back to the council to help make that decision on that way. And so they were able to sit there and say, hey, we want to do this, we want to rework this, and work with the budget committee to get that done and got that process going. And so we were able to address that in that direction. I haven't worked in, you know, where you are operating on deficit spending as much as you are here. And so, you know, but that's gonna be a combination of what do you want to cut, what do you want to move forward. And after you get a certain point in time, people do it. But one thing you need to make sure you do in that process is bring the staff along with you. Explain to the staff what you're doing, so it doesn't seem to be arbitrary decisions on this. And you'll be able to explain that to the staff, and I can work on that and get that done with them. And so those are some of the processes you do. But most of the cities I've worked with are in better financial shape after I left than when I came in.
Thank you. Jan Lee.
Okay, the city need to make some hard decisions to address rising operational costs and aging infrastructure to their utility systems. However, community members are frustrated and many feel they are already paying too much for these services. As city manager, how would you engage the public in this difficult conversation? What steps would you take to clearly explain and navigate this challenge while working toward a responsible and sustainable outcome? Although I think you've answered some of this.
I answered, I think a lot of that. I'll just go back through real quickly. A lot of times I've had public meetings talking about different ways that we can do things, you know, different investments we can make. Again, going back to Dundee, you know, we were able to provide, you know, the city and the council all the information on, you know, well, for example, I had a PowerPoint presentation I made for the city of Dundee and the water system, where I basically came in and showed, this is our expenses, this is our cost here, this is the amount of money we're coming in on it, and this is where we're losing $1.25 on each cubic foot of water coming in. And so when you sit there and put it in black and white and explain it to them, and most people in the city understand that. I'm not saying I've had people come in and say, I pay property taxes, I shouldn't have to pay for water. So that's their personal belief, and that's fine, but that's not how reality works in the long-term benefit, in my opinion. And so having those open meetings and encourage people to talk, you know, setting up times where, you know, I couldn't do this in Dundee because the mayor was busy all the time, but, you know, hopefully sit down with one of the council members at a coffee shop and with me and invite people to come in and say, hey, we're going to be, you know, buying coffee for people at such and such coffee shop Wednesday at 3, and work in that direction. And just be able to provide that, and because you need people to understand where the city issues are. If you're not transparent and open and answering questions and encouraging questions, you're going to get people not believing. And even then, you're not going to get everyone believing.
Can I take it from a different perspective?
Go ahead.
So we have a community that's largely on a fixed income, works basically minimum wage with Alaska rates, so $15 an hour. And I see you have an economic background. How would you use that to build up the economic value of our own community members so that they're actually improving in their incomes? Because we all know that we do need to raise rates, but at the same time, the cost of living to the community members is their income is stagnant. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, you're talking. That's a completely different question than
I know.
what you were asking on that direction. I don't. there is no easy answer to that question. There is no, what I said last night, silver bullet to a lot of this stuff, and that's one of the silver bullet things. But what you can do is you can hopefully get people and groups working together to provide that information, provide ways to do that. Again, I'd be looking at how do we help the businesses that are operating in Ketchikan right now do better? Is there people that we can bring in or ideas we can teach that can get, I said before, can we, bring in, the people from Dutch Brothers, marketers from Dutch Brothers, and how to talk about how they can market themselves better? Can we work with the Chamber of Commerce to provide that avenue for those things to happen? How do we create the knowledge of how you run a business better, accounting or wherever in that process is out there? Is there a small business development center that we can bring in to help train people who want to be trained in that direction? Is there, and so where things have happened successfully in that, in my knowledge, has been where you've been able to get local people training and working with other local people to run a business. Because a lot of times, going back to Grants Pass, the people who started the businesses that were successful there were local. They grew up there. They knew what was going on. They wanted to live there. And they also knew the people around them knew them from a high school kid. And a lot of them were like, well, if Joe Smo over here can start a business that's successful, I'm smarter than Joe Smo. I can do something like that. And so you began to train and work with each other and teach each other how to do things. And that's a long-term play. Last time I checked, which was like 2 years ago, the council, the small business association, the Chamber of Commerce in Grants Pass were still doing those quarterly business meetings, training people. And they had different subjects and stuff in that direction, and the city was still working with them on that direction. And then there's but it's that type of knowledge and thought process that you have to go in there. But you can't go in unless you want to do what Seattle did and say, now everyone, or the minimum wage for Ketchikan is now $30 an hour. That's not necessarily going to work either. So you need to figure out, how to educate people and get people thinking about what we can do. Again, last night I talked about, I think a lot of the young kids, young people, want to work, but they're not being shown, hey, this is what's going on. This is where you can, this is the type of skill that you can make a living on, and work in that direction. And then work with the schools and work with the colleges to get those type of skills trained so they know that there are jobs out there for them.
Thank you. Riley.
Ketchikan is experiencing a significant housing shortage compounded by high construction costs driven by shipping and other local factors. Additionally, city permitting and regulatory requirements add significant further barriers to development. Are you open to encouraging new housing construction? Please explain. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Are you open to reducing permitting costs and streamlining regulations, or potentially offering incentives to encourage new housing construction? Please explain your reasoning and the considerations that would shape your approach.
I'm open to taking a look at the process to see, what it is. A lot of it is like, why did you have those constructions? I mean, when you're talking about, regulatory, building regulations and planning regulations, why are they there? Are they local issues or are they state issues? And some, like for example, in Oregon, all the building regulations are state issues. We don't have a lot of control. What we have control over is getting the people there to do the job, making sure, doing it quickly and effectively as possibly can, and bringing in, the process there. But the regulatory issues on that for the building part of things in the state of Oregon are provided by the state, and the city has no say in that. And with planning regulations, a lot of those are local, but they're based on state regulations. So you got to figure out what you can cut and how you can work. What you try to do, what I always try to do, is try to make those sections work as seamlessly as possible. I spend time talking to all the planners I've ever had, and I'll give you an example of this. Is when I was in Dundee, when I met with our, we hired a new contract planner. I said, okay, this is what I want you to do. I want you, the state law says if they don't give you enough information to make a planning decision, you have to send them a letter saying, do this. It has to be certified letter and all this other thing. What I want you to do is when you figure out they didn't give you enough information, call them on the phone. Still send them a letter, but call them on the phone. And that can, and when I did this in Grants Pass, I had people I was talking to the planners in Grants Pass, and I go, can you do that for me? And they said, sure. So they began calling people on the phone and saying, hey, listen, you didn't give us enough information to make the planning decision. I need this information from you. I'll be sending you a letter saying that. And one time that guy was running up the stairs at, 4:55 on the Friday afternoon, trying to get that information in. Because, that's what the contractor wanted to happen in that direction. So you can work about there are ways we can work those two groups together to make it a thing. And you can take a look at the regulations and say, okay, are there regulations? But you have to understand why those regulations are and what you can and cannot cut in there. And, and then if there's something that, again, you can also take a look at your zoning maps and that processes and say, okay, when you take a look at Ketchikan waterfront, are you willing to have higher buildings there? Are you willing to put residential on top? Are you willing to change the size requirements for different aspects and stuff like that? And that's a process you can go through. But that's also a public process you have to come in and work in that direction there. I can't change the cost of getting building materials here or anything like that. I don't have an intellectual problem if it's a priority for the city to maybe throw some city funds to develop those type of things or help out in that process. I don't mind the concept of reducing fees if that's going to be the best way to do that. But again, if you reduce fees here, how are you going to support that in some of the location? And so those are the kind of questions and stuff like that. Yeah, but again, there's no silver bullet that's going to solve this issue. You also have topography here that's going to cause an issue on that one also. So those are some of the ideas I've used in the past. Again, master planning that what the community is going to be in 50 years. Understanding that is going to help make those choices easier.
Just a quick follow-up, if I may.
Yeah, real quick.
This isn't necessarily a question, but just some information for you coming in if you do get the position. That one thing that is happening a lot here is a significant amount of the builders in town actually won't even come in the city limits because they have zero fees, zero permitting outside the city limits. So what happens a lot here is, of course, we also have a problem with land availability in town, but there's a lot of guys that just won't even come in because you pay so much more and there's so much more red tape. So that would just be something to take a look at if you were to get the position ways, because, from a city perspective, we want the houses being built here so we can get the property tax and this and that, but we've almost kind of shot ourselves in the foot for lack of a better term. So just some information for you.
Well, I got my response to that becomes an issue the council can take. If they, that's something like that is a council discussion. Again, if you don't want to, have to charge for those fees, that's a council decision to do. That's a legitimate council benefit for that. But realize that there's a trade-off for doing that. And if you guys are willing to make the trade-off, then that's a council decision that we will put that process.
Moving forward. Yeah.
Imagine you're faced with a situation where the city council is leaning toward a decision that would address their immediate priorities, but your professional assessment shows that a different course of action would better serve the long-term interests of the community and its residents. How would you navigate that situation, and what steps would you take to balance maintaining a positive relationship with the council while still advocating for what you believe is best for the city?
Well, I don't believe in putting yourself into a win-lose situation with the council. You will know that I will disagree with you guys on that process. You will know it behind the scenes. I'll have talked to hopefully each and every one of you individually about what that is. We would have provided you the information to make the decision in a council meeting. And, again, if you don't want to go in that direction, you are the council. You are the policy issue is there, and I will follow through on that. And, it's like I tell my staff, you can tell me anything you want to tell me, but once the decision is made, I don't want to hear about it. You can't tell me I'm wrong. I'll know I'm wrong in 5 minutes or something, but but once the decision is made, that's the end of the conversation. We follow through with what the decision is. And so that's the process I would work. But I would have the conversations with you. I'd have conversations with the council, every council member say, hey, listen, I see you're doing this. This is my concern. And explain those concerns. Why you feel this is the best course of action, and what are you trying to do in that direction? And if there's an issue with that, or if there is, when I've had issues like that in the past, it's always been about legal issues. And where I think the council is following what the law is. And so that's when I try to bring in the city attorney and have conversations like, for example, in Dundee, We had, we had a builder talking to the mayor on a regular basis. So anytime the planning people said, okay, you need to do this because this is what the regulations are in the plan, in the city code, the mayor would call me and say, oh, they're complaining about this. It's going to cost them an extra, X amount of dollars in that. And I'm like, that's what the law is. If you want to come in and change the code, that's fine. You can do that. But realize if you change the code, you're going to make, that the neighbors next door can take it to LUBA, Land Use Board of Appeals, and they can have it overturned really quickly. And that's going to cost the city money. That's going to cost everybody time and the whole bit. So, let's try to work with them and figure out how to solve that issue. And so, but it really came with a lot of times is like, okay, legally, we cannot do this. And most of my experience when they've had those kind of discussions is because they want to do something that is quasi legally correct, not correct, and it makes me uncomfortable. And that's when I have those private conversations. Say this is what the law is. This is what our ordinances are, and this is what you're asking us to do, and they're not aligned.
Thank you. As you're aware, general government KPU, for the most part, have separate staff and budgets. There are situations in which departments from these two areas have to coordinate on projects and may have different priorities or approaches. How do you go about establishing priorities when those departments or staffs involved may have opposing viewpoints? How do you promote and encourage a healthy work environment while ensuring positive outcomes?
By making the work environment positive, by working with staff and talking to them, and so if they're coming in, water saying, well, we need to do this, and sewer saying we need to do this, we can sit down and talk about that, and I'll have both of those department heads in the office to say, okay, why is this more important than this? And I know both of these are important, but for going back to the city council, this is our priority. And this is where we're going to put the priority issue on this one here. So for this case, it's going to be water. And so, make sure that we understand this is going to be here, or you basically sit down and figure out what the highest priority and what the council's goals are, and you work in that direction with them. And you explain to people what's going on. People have, if they understand what's going on and feel good about, feel good, that's not the right word, but they understand what's happening around them, and I can understand the thought process you have. I'm really big on thought process. What's the thought process that this staff has? What the thought process the council has? And once we can understand the thought process, even if you disagree with the thought process, if you understand it's rational, most people will understand the agreement and be positive in there and feel that they're part of the solution on that. And that's one of the things that I was trying to make sure everyone feels like they're part of the solution.
Thank you. Judy.
Okay, I'd like to offer a scenario. Major infrastructure failure occurs within the city-owned utility, prolonged water outage or an electrical disruption or whatever. The failure impacts several neighborhoods. You see that the community's frustration is growing quickly, and you know that council members are receiving complaints and demanding immediate updates. At the same time, your division manager advises you that providing too much early information could create confusion or liability. How do you approach such an event?
Well, I would have a public meeting or go door to door, talking to the people who are frustrated and, answering the calls that are coming to me, with their frustration and saying, this is what I know right now. And this is what we're looking at, and this is what we're trying to do. And, be working with my staff to figure out the best way to do steps in solving the issue. And you can be proactive in how you are handling things and what you're telling people without, putting yourself into legal liability. And if I feel there's some legal liability we'd be looking at, in that direction, I'd be working with the city attorney to make sure what we're saying does not bring into that legal liability. But you have to protect the city in that direction. People are going to be frustrated, and basically a lot of times what I like to do is give an outlet for people for that frustration. At least, so I try to okay, I'm hearing what you're saying. This is what we have. This is what I'm hearing you say. This is what I know, and this is what we're trying to do. And even if it's not 100% satisfying to people. At least they didn't feel like they've been heard. So when people don't feel they've been heard or listened to, that's when they get more and more trouble, and that's when they get more and more angry. But they feel like they're at least being listened to. A lot of times, even though they don't like the answer or they don't like what's happening, they feel they have an understanding of what's going on.
Thank you.
As I tell my staff, I get paid for yelled at by city citizens, and they don't. So if someone's really that upset, you can ask my phone number, I'll talk to them, and I don't shy away from that.
Abby,
Your Honor, my question was asked by another council member early on. It was the follow-up, Janelle's follow-up was this question. So,
okay,
question.
thank you. Jay,
What do you view as the role of the city council in dealing with the city manager / general manager and the administration / department heads?
Can you repeat the question again?
What do you view as the role of the city council in dealing with the city manager, general manager, and the administration department heads?
Well, my dream is that the city council will do whatever the city manager wants, but that's not happening. We are partners. The city council, the city administrator, and the department heads are all partnered in doing the same thing, which is provide good service to the citizens of Ketchikan. Now, the roles are different. The roles of the city council is providing the direction and the legislative framework for which the city manager and the department heads operate under. So, again, you can set the table. This is what we want to achieve. This is what we want to see happening, and this is the laws that we have in that direction that we want to see happening. For example, we want to focus on water quality, or we want to focus on sewer quality this year in that process, and then we as a city city staff and administration will work to be able to provide good service in that direction. But that's kind of where I view it, is like the overview is you do the overview and then you set the table of what needs to be done. The city staff will work to get what we can do, make suggestions to the council on how to do that. The council can say, we like this idea, we don't like this idea, we like to see more of this, we like to see less of this, and work in that direction. But your partner's in the same direction.
Thank you.
yeah, follow up? So, Steve, do you have any questions for the council?
Yeah, I have two ones real quick. What does the council view as the role of the city manager in Ketchikan?
I think we understand that the city manager's job is to manage the staff, manage the departments, carry out the directions and policies that the council has set. They are the clearinghouse from questions from the public, concerns of the public. They are in charge when we have an emergency arise. They make sure that all the departments are working in coordination, and then they're the liaison to keep the council informed of what's happening, what the need may be. Their job is to be transparent. The office is to the public as well as to the council, and keep us informed of what's going on. The council is also responsible for making sure there's clear direction. So that, like you said, I think that you hit it on the head. We're more partners than we are, separate unities, in that we all need to know our roles and work with that. The city manager, though, in Ketchikan has, at this present time, is wearing two different hats. They also have the utility managers. They're the chief administrator for that also. And so it's very demanding in regards when you go from a utility standpoint to a general government standpoint, working with tax-based organizations as well as revenue-based. And then we throw a fully functional telecommunication company in the mix, and then we've got a huge work infrastructure out here. So
Yeah, see, that's what I find fascinating, and exciting is I get to learn about those two things. I've never dealt with those things directly. And to learn about them, I think is an exciting thing for me to do. So, yeah, anyway.
Anybody else? What do you guys think? Yeah.
I'll just throw one thing in there. You've talked a lot about, uh, very importantly, the legalities of, what the council and mayor and may not do and what the manager should do. And just kind of the flip side of that coin, I think that sometimes sometimes it does feel like we can get so bogged down in all that our hands are tied. And as Judy mentioned in one of her questions, we're the ones getting the calls on things. A lot of times people don't know who the man, well, okay, for 26 years they did, but more recently, people don't always know who the manager is, or they may not feel comfortable approaching them. So sometimes it's like we're getting asked stuff, but we don't know. So I would just ask, I guess, to remember that the citizens put their trust and their vote in the members of the council. And although there are some barriers to what can and can't be done, they expect this group to be making important decisions and to be listening to them. So just, I guess, that's just something I
No,
want
I
to throw out
understand what you're saying. What I've always worked with councils on is if you have a question you don't know how to answer or don't, or there's something like that, send it on me. I'll answer it for you. I answer everything within 24 hours, except on weekends if I'm out of town and stuff like that. Or I call people up on the phone. I don't hide in an office. If someone wants to talk to me, they can come in, I'll come down and talk to them anytime. And, explain what I know what's going on in that direction and try to get them more information. And the same thing, if they contact you and you don't know what's going on, say, hey, I don't know off the top of my head, I'll send Steve an email. And he'll get in touch with you. Let me know if he doesn't. And I think that's a legitimate way to do things. I don't expect the citizens, from my viewpoint, the citizens, as long as the toilet flushes, the water turns on, electric turns on when you flip it, and you don't have to go over a bunch of rocks to get home, they're happy. And, overall, and so they're not gonna worry about a lot of things in that direction. So you gotta make sure you have the bare necessities going. When the bare necessities aren't there, the electricity says line turn on, the toilet doesn't flush, and the water doesn't go on, that's when you really begin to have a problem with citizens more than anything else. In my experience in that direction. But I understand your concern.
So, it's not like, unlike other communities, all these council members, they work in a different part of the community doing different things, right? So we're, relatives, friends, we're neighbors, we're accessible.
Yeah.
Some of us are more accessible.
And she brags about it.
And so the public does come to us,
I know.
because, they trust that we will get the message to wherever it needs to go. So, there is a lot of conversations or questions that may come to your office from the council members because people are talking to them.
Yeah.
And my goal has always been to not surprise the manager. I want to make sure that they
And I
know
love that.
So, that's just the way it works.
All right, let me ask my one last question, and then we can get on to the other interview you have. Okay, pretend, and I say pretend because I don't want to say that, imply that you give me the job. Pretend I have gotten this job, and this is my 1-year review. What will have been a good year from the council's perspective?
Yeah, good, Riley.
No more tax or rate increases.
Okay.
Yes, Abby.
Prioritize in our financial situation, prioritizing our needs versus our wants and making sure our needs are taken care of before our wants.
I think my goal would be for you to come back to the council with, and through the year, and working with staff, working with council, to come up with a strategic plan that looks out 20, 30 years, and try to set those priorities and discuss the funding options that we may have for those. Because a lot of time, like you say, communities we react to what's right in front of us. And if you don't have anything more than a 5-year plan, you're in trouble. And
Yeah, I would like to stop being reactive. We tend to be very reactive. We're always putting out fires. And I would like to see us actually have those plans in place and implementing where things need, like with a 5-year, what has to be, and start working towards that, knowing that there is going to be a cost to that, but at the same time, knowing it's also going to be beneficial.
Yes, Judy.
So from my perspective, I mean, all these things are great and I agree with all of that, but I'm looking for somebody who's a team builder. At the end of the year, I want to know that you know your staff, that your staff feel comfortable going to you about issues that they may have, and that you've built a team and that you will take their consideration, because they're frankly, after 1 year, they still know a lot more about this community than you will, right? I mean, that just makes sense. So to me, that you take when they come to you with ideas and things that are important to the community, that you pay attention to that, you look at that, and that we see that team building effect in the community.
So I think the most important thing that we do through the year, right this time of year, figure out this budget and how it supports the operations of the city of Ketchikan, and yet raises the current concerns of the citizens in regards to the cost of maintaining that. So I think part of that review would be how you address next year's budget. It's probably after that. Yeah.
Thanks, Your Honor. I think for me, at the 1 year mark, it would be important to see a demonstrated grasp of the minutia of individual departments, and then how that folds into the larger view of how the departments interact with one another and how the utilities in the city functions as a whole. So it's a lot of information to take in, and even in a 1 year period, I think being able to get your head wrapped around all of those inner workings, I think would require a pretty gargantuan effort. And so at the 1 year mark, if I could see that you had some command of both those, the interdepartment details and then how that impacts the city overall, I think that would be a good demonstration of your capacity in the role.
Anybody else? Thank you, Steve.
Well, thank you for the time. You have a wonderful city here. Enjoy it.
We have some time for a break for our next one, so we can take a break.
Coffee.
So Mayor and Council, we're prepared for our second candidate in the interview process. So I'll allow him pretty much to do much of the introduction, but this is Keith Morey. Keith, again, has 30 years of government experience, including in general management, community development, economic development, and also worked in other levels of government as well. So with that, I'll pass on to Mr. Morey.
Good morning, Keith.
Thank you all. Ready for me to go ahead and introduce myself?
So before we begin,
Please.
let's give you the opportunity to do so.
Okay. I'm Keith Morey. I have met some of you and just want to tell you, first of all, how much I appreciate how welcoming your staff and your community has been. We've had an absolutely wonderful time here. And people have been so gracious and kind. We've met people, of course, through the city, but we got to introduce some local people that live in the community, the principal of the high school and a couple of other people, and have just loved everything about it. So it's been a great experience for my wife and I. My wife, Ruth, is here with me. I got my master's degree in public administration at Brigham Young University because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I read The Catcher in the Rye. I loved the concept of Holden Caulfield being the one that could see a problem and protect the children from falling off the cliff. That was kind of the baseline of that story. And that resonated with who I was. And when I looked at public administration, that seemed like the way you could do that, right? To go into a community and understand what the community values were, the community priorities were, and then use our legislation and our city assets and resources to protect and preserve what's important to us, really resonated with who I am and what I wanted to be. So I got my master's degree and just got fortunate enough to get hired right out of college by Payson as a city manager, because the city manager left and came to King Salmon, Alaska. And I've been in local government ever since. I've chief of staff for a congressman for a little while until I realized how awful the federal government was to work for. and done a lot of economic development, community development, and worked in communities all along the Wasatch Front. Worked for the governor's office doing economic development, and my wife and I are at the point in our lives where our kids are grown up and we love the outdoors, and we wanted something that we felt like we could contribute in a place we could make a difference. And we love Catch a Can, and we love what we've heard, and hopefully we can answer some questions that you have and see what I can do to help you with those concerns and solve the problems that are worrisome to you. So that's a little bit of my background.
Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think is the most important trait or skill a manager should have to be successful and effective? How have you demonstrated this quality in your career?
Yeah, what's fascinating to me is we learn at a really early age how to talk, but we don't really learn how to listen. And from my perspective, one of the most important things that a city manager has to be able to do is to be able to listen and understand both the priorities and the agenda that are important to the city council, but also our constituents, our stakeholders, our citizens in the community, and then utilize the resources that we have at our disposal, our city employees, our facilities, our equipment, our money, to try to make those things come together in a way that protects and preserves what we've all determined is most important to us. So I learned a really good lesson in my first community. The mayor called me and said, I've got a resident that has a concern and I need you to take care of it for me. I said, absolutely. I'll go back to my office right now and I'll get on the phone and I'll talk to him. He said, no, I don't want you to call him. He said, I want you to get in your car. I want you to drive over to his house and I want you to sit on his porch and pull a weed and sit and listen to him and make sure that he feels like you understand what his concerns are, and then talk about whether or not we can help him. And that was a real powerful lesson to me, because I think a lot of times we don't take time on people's terms to listen to what's important. And so I've tried throughout my whole career to engage with stakeholders in a way that I understand what the issues are, and then to work hard with my communication skills to build consensus so that move that agenda forward so that we're all aligned in a way that we can all be supportive of what we're trying to do. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Jan Lee.
Good morning. We would like to hear your perspective on leadership roles. What are functions you believe fall clearly under administrative authority? And what are examples of council policy making? How do you protect that boundary respectfully when a council member moves into the administrative space?
Well, I mean, you guys have adopted the city manager form of government, obviously, because there's value in having there be a break between the legislative and the administrative process, right? And I think at some point, Ketchikan realized that. Many communities across the country have done that for really important reasons. It's very easy for elected officials to become influenced by what the next vote is going to be. And that has the potential to impact how we run business on the day-to-day basis. So theoretically, the city manager is supposed to be one step removed from that so that those decisions are a little more unbiased and can be more objective about how do we protect city funds, city resources, departments, staff, and things of that sort. But that has to be, having said that, that's the philosophy, right? But we have to come to an understanding with each other on where those boundaries are appropriate. And I'm not going to begin to tell you, you guys are going to hire me and we're going to talk then about we want this relationship to roll forward. I'm going to tell you when I think we have issues that maybe create a potential problem. And we're going to try to navigate through that. But ultimately, you're going to decide how we want this process to look, because I work for you and I represent you. And I may tell you that I disagree, but ultimately, if you decide this is how we want to handle things, that's the mind and will of the council, and that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to make that work the very best that I can for us. If I find areas where council members are getting involved in a way that I think is troublesome, we're going to talk about that, and not in a combative way, but just to talk about what the potential implications are from that, what the impact is to the staff and the work environment, and how do we mitigate that? Because we all spend too much time here at work. And you know, from your work experience, we spend more waking hours here than we do at home. So, I mean, I want this to be an incredible place for me and for you and for our employees. I want us to come together and tackle great issues and have great feelings about it and celebrate our successes and go home and be able to sleep well at night.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question? To me, it's just communication. It's let's be transparent. You guys tell me what your concerns are. I'll tell you when I think that that's created an issue. and let's resolve it up front. I'm gonna be upfront with you. I'm not gonna talk behind your backs about it. We're gonna come forward and talk about it, and you guys are gonna tell me, no, this is how we wanna operate, and we'll find a way to make it work.
Thank you.
Right.
Good morning. Given the significant financial challenges the city is currently facing, leadership must make difficult choices to return to a stable and sustainable budget, with the options being narrowed to implementing continued substantial increases to taxes and rates, or reducing the overall size and scope of city government. How would you approach this decision, and what factors would guide your recommendation?
Okay, that's a great question. The first city that I told you about, that I got hired at, I loved the city manager. He was a great guy. He was really loose about how he did the budget. I interned at that city between my first and second year in my public administration program. And my assignment as an intern was to put the budget into digital format, because it hadn't been in Excel spreadsheets or anything like that. So by the time I was done, I knew exactly what was going on with the budget. There were occasions where I would go to the city manager and I would say, look, this department is over budget, is going to be over budget by $100,000 or this or that. And he would say, don't worry about it. We always have enough money. Just put an extra $50,000 in there. It'll be okay. So when the budget got passed and he left, it was the end of the year in Utah. We run on a fiscal budget, not a calendar budget. So by December, you're kind of halfway through, and he was gone, and they were trying to hire. I got hired about January or February, and they had done a financial audit, and they determined that the city was going to be about $500,000 in the hole. So the very first thing I had to do, and I told everybody in the meeting the other night, one of the first things that happened is, because the budget was so out of whack, none of the employees have received raises for about 4 or 5 years. So the city had a power outage. The power department decided to go on strike. I'm studying for finals, and I get a call that says the power's out and the power employees won't come to work because they haven't had salary increases for 5 years. So my baptism by fire to local government was this huge budget shortfall, employees that don't want to work, equipment that's old and aging, and what do? And that's how I started. And it was awkward. It was really tough. The first thing we had to do was we had to go in, and we had to, the only way we could salvage the budget was to find positions to lay off. So every department was asked to find a position that they could lay off. And I didn't like it. I had to help with that process. I had to hand some of those pink slips out to employees. But we made some really hard decisions, and then pledged ourselves to the employees in the community that we would make it right, that we would fix it. And we just hunkered down and became really fiscally accountable for where the money was going. And not that this is the case in Ketchikan, but a lot of the department heads weren't tracking their budgets day to day, week to week, to know exactly where the revenues versus expenditures were. So we began to be really thorough about making sure we knew every minute of every day what was coming in and what was going out, and reporting that back to the city council so that we didn't have a future deficit situation. So I've heard some of the comments about Ketchikan, and I'm sympathize very much with your concerns. I think we all have to get on in alignment with each other on exactly what are our priorities as far as vehicle and equipment maintenance, with infrastructure improvements, with our capital improvement plans over the next 5, 10, 20 years, and prioritize those. And I talked a little bit about this last night. If we're making decisions on the fly about what we need to fund, that can be really awkward, because it's difficult to respond to citizens who are concerned about rate increases. If we can put that into the documents that we have and engage the public in the strategic planning process and the capital improvement projects that need to be done, so that they have the opportunity to provide input, then when it comes time for us to implement a tax increase or a rate increase or whatever, and the citizens are concerned, it's much easier for you as elected officials to say, look, I understand, but remember 2 years ago when we did the capital improvement plan that suggested that this rate structure improvement had to increase? You all participated in that process. We heard your comments, and this is the strategy we put together to mitigate those concerns. But now we have to move forward with this, because if we don't, this equipment is going to fail. This infrastructure is going to fail. It just gives you an out. So from my perspective, I just think we have to be thoughtful. We have to plan ahead, and then we have to be willing to commit and move forward with those things, because I don't want my property taxes to go up any more than you guys do, but I can't remember the last time the price on a loaf of bread went down. Right? Or the price of gas. And it's the same thing with our infrastructure and all the stuff that we have to maintain. So from my perspective, those kinds of increases ought to be an annual thing that we're even if it's small, right? That we help the citizen understand, just like the regular economy where you're getting raises at home or the price of bread goes up, these have to go up as well to protect and preserve the integrity of all the equipment and facilities that we have. Otherwise, we're going to end up at a point where we've got failing infrastructure and we're talking massive, massive amounts of money that we're going to have to find that no one wants to try to solve for. So, I mean, my approach would be to be really thoughtful, really strategic, to plan ahead, allow the public to engage in that so that they're aware, and then stay true to our commitment to inch forward little by little by little so that those impacts are mitigated and we're starting to address those issues. That was a long, long answer. I'm sorry, but is that?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Murray, please share a recent failure or initiative that did not pan out as planned. Why do you think this occurred? What lessons were learned? And what would you do differently if given the opportunity to try again?
It's a great, great question. When I was a city manager in Mapleton, a small community about the size of Ketchikan, maybe just a little bit smaller. The city council became concerned that the cost of having our own police and fire department was excessive, and that there might be savings that we could obtain if we shared that accountability with the surrounding county borough in Utah. Their counties, but similar to our borough here. So contract with the local sheriff's department for police, fire, and ambulance protection instead of having our own. So they asked me to do the analysis to figure out if that was an opportunity, and if so, what the savings would be. Well, immediately, the police department blew up, and the fire department blew up because the word got out that, we're looking to axe all of our public servants, right? And so there was this huge firestorm of public clamor. What are we doing? How can we do this to these people that protect and preserve our community? So I worked really closely with those people to reassure them that this is just an analysis. No one's made a decision. We're trying to figure out what the best use of our money is. And then I negotiated with the county that if we were successful, that they would hire from our police department and fire department to staff up for that opportunity instead of drawing from the surrounding community. So we would protect and preserve almost all of the positions that we have in the city. They would just shift from us to the sheriff's department. And it turned out after doing the analysis that the city would have saved about $300,000 a year on an ongoing basis to do that. So when it came time to present that to the city council meeting, at a city council meeting, the community went nuts, and we found out that we were probably going to have a huge crowd of people. So we moved the meeting from a room about this size to the local gymnasium, and we had about 300 absolutely furious citizens show up, ready to lynch me from the tree out in front of the gym. The police department was concerned about it enough. They asked me if they could escort me to the meeting. So it was really, really tense. And I went in and made the presentation. The city council heard all the comments from the citizens and ultimately decided that the citizens were passionate enough about it that it didn't matter how much it cost. We were going to retain and protect our police and fire department. And to me, that was the right decision. It could have been a failure. You asked about a failure. It was a failure in that I think what they were hoping to accomplish, we never did, because we listened to our citizens and responded to what was most important to them. And the lesson that I learned from that is, from a fiscal accountability perspective, we may have the finance director or department head say, this is what we want to do because this is what we need. We're ultimately accountable to the residents, and the residents are the ones that have to foot the bill for that. And at some point, if you've heard their voice and we can't find a way to support what we think might save us the most money or might be best, we may do something different. And at that point, we all just have to get on board and make that the best decision. And that's what we did at Mapleton. And I think that's how you mitigate for those kinds of failures, right? We listen, we learn, and then we develop consensus, we get on board, and we make that the very best decision it possibly can be for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. New leadership can create disruption to an organization.
New leadership can create destruction. There's that
Disruption.
disruption, yeah,
Disruption.
or destruction.
How would you go about establishing trust with the team during your first few months? What specific step would you take to build credibility and rapport? And how would you carry forward your observations into the work as a city manager?
It's interesting because we had Lacey and I talked for just a minute, and she was asking, kind of what my approach was, and if I got the position, was I the kind of person that was just going to start the next day and say, well, this is how I do things, and so let's change a bunch of things up. And I told her, yeah, I'm not about that. I'm not the kind of person that thinks we change things just for change's sake. So from my perspective, when we find an agreement to bring me on board, which I'm hopeful that we can do, I want to get into the organization first and really find out who the people are, how we work, what's going on. I don't want to shake things up and change things right away. I want to get to understand the history behind how we're doing what we're doing. What's the philosophy? What's the strategy? Are there things that we can begin to tweak that might make a difference? I was talking a little bit about Lacey, about some of the communication we have between council and staff, and I mentioned to her in some of the communities that I've worked for, we don't have an item on the agenda for the council to vote on until it's been through a work session first. And at the work session, we present all the information that you might need. You might have questions we can't answer. We go back and bring those back so that when you're ready to vote, we've answered all your questions and concerns before the vote takes place. Maybe that's something we can think about. I don't know. But from my perspective, how do you manage the potential disruption? Well, first of all, you don't come in with the intent to disrupt. You come in with the intent to figure out what's working and how do we maximize the potential of what's already working. And then are there things that need to be tweaked, or later on, are there things we've determined can't be tweaked that need to be changed or need to be fixed? I'm not going to assume anything's broken until we try to start the engine and figure out that the engine doesn't start. And at that point, maybe you tweak the starter or the battery, or you try to jump it. And if that doesn't work, maybe you do this or that. And we're not going to replace the engine until we know the engine's blown and has to be replaced. So that's kind of my approach, Mayor. I don't know if that answered your question.
It does. Thank you.
You bet.
Judy.
So, Ketchikan's a beautiful community with unlimited outdoor recreational opportunities. But we're also a remote community with limited access to what might be considered normal amenities, like a lot of shopping, a lot of restaurants. We measure rainfall in feet and experience long, dark winters. We want a city manager who is certain that our community is a good fit for him and her and their family. We want someone who will stay for the long term and make this their home. Why do you believe you have that?
Well, great question. And I respect your passion and your desire, because I think it reflects who you guys are, wanting to find someone that's going to commit themselves to the community. And I pledge to you that that's exactly who I am. I brought my wife with me. We've engaged not only with you and with your staff, but with community people that aren't part of the city organization, because we wanted to know what people that we might associate with have to say about Ketchikan. It's phenomenal to me the number of people that we met or got introduced to randomly that are from Utah that have come to Ketchikan and have stayed. And we've met those people, we've talked to them, we've probed about what it's like to live here and why they've come and stayed. My wife and I love the outdoors. I mean, it's why we live in Utah. We camp, we fish, we hike. And this is exactly the type of environment that we love. And we're water people. We're fanatics about water. So to look out the window and see us surrounded by water is exactly who we are. More than that, we want to find a place where we can contribute and participate and make a difference. Personally, professionally, as a family, as a community. And I just am hopeful after 30 years in local government that I have the kind of skill set that you think might lend value to your organization. I'm not a rocket scientist, And I'm not perfect in any way, shape, or form, but I've been doing this for a long time, and I've tackled a lot of the issues that I think you're dealing with. And I think I can contribute with you collaboratively in a way that we can work together to solve some of the pain points that I know have been a concern for you. And we want to do that, not only at the government level, but at the community level in a way that we feel like we've engaged and this becomes our home.
Great answer. Thank you.
People. Abby?
Describe a time when you developed and implemented a long-term strategic plan in a complex organization. How did you align resources, manage competing priorities, and measure success over time?
Okay, I'm going to give you a couple. I was hired as the city manager in South Jordan City, which was a city about 60,000, because Kennecott Copper is a huge mining operation in Salt Lake Valley. It's owned by Rio Tinto, the third largest mining company in the world. And a lot of the property around the mine site in Salt Lake Valley, thousands and thousands of acres, had been impacted by the mining operation. And as far as Rio Tinto's global sustainability initiative, they wanted to find a way to reclaim that property and turn it back to beneficial use. So I was hired as the city manager to develop our city ordinances that would allow for a master planned large community, a 5,000 acre master planned community within South Jordan. And so we had to be very strategic, working with national, international planners about, first of all, how do you design a new city within an existing city, basically from the ground up? Where do the streets go? What's the scale of the building should be? Where do you put commercial next to residential? How do you plan for capital improvement? How do you plan for water, sewer, all the infrastructure demands and needs that we're going to need as this community grows now and into the future? And so that was a very, very strategic effort from the ground up on how do we build this now and into the future. That project is probably between halfway and 3/4 finished now, but they still are working from that land plan that we developed in 2004, 2005. To me, it was a very, very visionary process, a very long-term process. How do you plan ahead? And for a while, matter of fact, I met Ruth because Ruth lived in that community, and her husband had passed away, and I'd gone through a divorce, and we met there. But to see what we had strategically planned come to reality, and that it actually worked the way we wanted it to, and that people lived the way they thought they would, was a reflection of how careful planning, careful strategic planning can make a difference, a good difference in how we all live and interact with each other. So, I mean, that's the example that we give.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question? Okay.
Yes.
Sure.
Follow up. Can you share a specific example of a time when you stepped outside traditional government processes or standard operating procedures to solve a problem and what the outcome was?
Yeah, I will. In that same community, after I gotten the land plan done and we got it all entitled and approved, and that company began building the community, they needed a community manager. So they asked me to step away from South Jordan as assistant city manager and come over and be the first community manager for that project. So I did that. One of the things we wanted to do is we wanted to find a way to integrate the school system into the community in a way that hadn't ever been done before. So the very first elementary school that got built in that community, we wanted to have a recreation center, community center attached to the elementary school. And nobody had done that in Utah. There's only a couple of other places in the country where it's been done. And there was a lot of worry and concern about that. Our vision was, wouldn't it be incredible if a mother comes or father comes and drops their child off at elementary school, parks the car and walks into the gym and exercises, walks around the indoor track and see the kids, playing or doing whatever, and has this close interaction, communities binding together and interacting with each other in close proximity to the school environment. There were a lot of parents that were really concerned about pedophiles coming in and being able to watch their children or things of that sort. So we went through meeting after meeting after meeting with stakeholders in the school district and the parents, trying to develop a design that mitigated for all those concerns. And over a very lengthy year and a half, 2 year long process, we finally developed a plan for that school and that community center that everybody was 100% on board with, that parents were excited about, the school district was excited about, even though the school district had never done that before. We funded it, the school district funded their portion, and we built it, and it became this incredible heart for the first phase, the first community, the first phase of that community development, and a real anchor. So to me, that was way, way outside of what we normally do in government. It was us reaching across to another government entity, school district, that's not a local government, and finding a way to bring common issues and concerns together in a way that allowed both of us to be incredibly successful and more successful. It was the highest rated elementary school in the county, in the state. And we were having people from all over the community begging to see what they would have to do to transfer their kids in that school. Wildly successful.
Thank you. Okay.
Well, you answered about the strategic plan in a complex organization, but I want to know if there was competing priorities, how would you manage that?
Well, there's always, that's a great question. I guess I'm intrigued because from my perspective, I don't know that I've ever run in a situation where there wasn't competing priorities. I mean, I think that's the day-to-day management accountability that we have in communities. The fire department is always going to feel like they've got things that are absolutely paramount and important today. So is the public works department. So is the streets department. So is the sewer department. They're all going to have competing interests, and our citizens are too, right? That yeah, we're not worried about that. I want a better recreation center. I want more opportunities for my kids to have athletic opportunities. So my perspective is you're representatives of those citizens. So gathering from you, your input on what you've heard is important. Working with you to engage with the community to identify what the community has said is important. Helping you understand from my perspective what the needs and the demands are within our departments that are priorities and what the implications might be if we don't do A, B, and C, and D, and then coming to a consensus together. In those situations, there's always going to be winners and losers, so to speak, right? Because one project we're not going to be able to fund right now. It's going to get pushed off. And from my perspective, that's just the reality of how we do business. I mean, unless someone dumps a pot of gold in Ketchikan tomorrow, we are always going to struggle with those issues. And the only way we're going to survive that is to be completely united together on the final decision. We're not going to agree up front because you're going to have an opinion, and so are you, and so is the fire chief, and so is the police chief, and so are our residents. But to hear all of that and to come together and civilly debate that and discuss it, and then mutually agree after all that, this is the course of action that we're going to take. And here's how we're going to communicate that to our constituents and get behind it. I mean, I think that's how you mitigate it. But there's always going to be someone's going to have to concede and say, great, you've convinced me I'm not going to get my project this year. He's going to get his instead. She's going to get hers instead, because it's always going to be that way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jay.
Good afternoon. Discuss your approach to communicating with the council, especially in preparation for council meetings. How will you make sure that we are well informed and that our interests are being addressed?
Do you mind if where was that? Which one was that one?
Discuss your approach to communicating with the council.
Okay. I just want to make sure I answer that the right way. Give me just a second. Well, again, I haven't been here long enough to tell you what to do. But from what I have heard, I think one of the things that could help us significantly would be to consider incorporating some type of work session into the process of how we make decisions. I am not going to have every answer to every question you have for me on the spot, and our city employees aren't either. But I think there's a healthy way to create an environment where they feel safe presenting what they do know today, and so do I, and get you the information that we have right now, you expressing what we haven't been able to answer for you, and have us have time to be able to go get it for you and bring it back before you make a decision and a vote. And I don't think it has to be more time consuming than it already is. I'm not suggesting that we have double the meetings that you're already having. I'm suggesting that maybe one of the things that could mitigate for helping inform you is to say, for example, we're not gonna vote on issues until they've been through a work session first. And some of those are gonna be easy, right? You may be able to say, we don't need to talk about that one anymore. Everybody already knows the back one. That one can move right forward to the next meeting. This one may be a priority issue. We don't need to have a work session on it first. But for other items, to think in terms of, let's talk about it first, make sure everybody has the information that they need, and then vote on it afterwards, creates a buffer. So that if I don't have the answer that you want right now on the fly, I don't feel like I'm really under the gun because I couldn't answer it. And neither do our staff members. So my perspective is, you ask, I'm gonna tell you everything that I know. If I don't know the answer, I'll go find it. And I'm not gonna expect to know everything. I would hope that you don't expect me to know everything, but open, consistent communication with you on those items that you have on the agenda. And if we discover together, look, there's more questions on the council than we have today. We're not ready for this one. Let's push it a week so that we have time to answer the questions. So you don't feel like we're trying to make decisions that we don't have answers for. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dick?
Yeah, have you managed or been part of an organization that was struggling financially? What steps did you undertake, and did you place your organization in a stronger financial position?
Yeah, I think that the first community that I mentioned, Payson, was probably the best example that I have of that. It was tough. It was so tough. The water superintendent had a heart attack and died. And a lot of people blamed me and said that the budget decisions that we were making to solve the problem were my fault. And I really carried that burden. I don't think that was true, really. But it was stressful. It was stressful for all of us. We made some gut wrenching decisions. None of the employees that we ended up having to lay off were bad employees. It's not like we were using this as an opportunity to get rid of Deadwood. It was a painful, deep cut that took an emotional toll on everyone. There were projects that needed to be funded that we didn't get to fund as we tried to balance the budget. But as an example, the city employees had not been represented fairly and weren't getting paid a fair wage. And so the strike that the power department took, although I think their approach was inappropriate, and we got them to go back to work because I convinced them that it was inappropriate. It wasn't the way to solve the problem. I understood why they did what they did. No one had listened before, and it was a way to get heard. And we pledged that we would fix it. And we just became committed to making the hard decisions. We focused on economic development and tried to improve revenue streams that maybe had flattened out, and stimulate our economy so that we had new revenue opportunities. It completely flipped things, and everybody got on board and got excited and got passionate. And it was those next 5, 6, 7 years were some of the most incredible years I've had my entire career, because we were completely united. I mean, those tough decisions brought us together in a way that I don't think anything else could. And we became united on the pathway forward, and it was fun. It was a great time. And I'm not saying we still didn't have some difficult things to do, but we did some incredible things together. And so from my perspective, yeah, I have been through that. And I think we can be successful at it, and it will be stressful. But I think I'm highly competent in helping us manage through that. And I know we can do it. And Ketchikan has got too much going for it to think that we can't solve it. I know we can.
Dan, I had a follow-up.
Just to follow up
Yeah.
on that, once you were able to streamline and get things going, were you able to hire back some of those?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We pledged that we were going to get our employees on the salary scale where they needed to be over the next 3 years. And so incrementally, year by year, we staffed up, we budgeted up, and made sure that we did what we needed to do to get them on in that scale. As we did that and became more accountable, and I mean, this was a small town, and I'm not speaking poorly about my department heads at that time, but a lot of them didn't have the fiscal accountability that they should have had. So once we really began to be thoughtful and careful about where's the money coming in and where's it going out, fiscal accountability was not a hard thing to do. We became much more cognizant about what money we did have to spend and what money we didn't have to spend. And that gave us the discretion to hire back some of the employees because money wasn't just disappearing in places that, I mean, when you're not tracking it day to day, it's easy to say, do we need to replace that? Well, yeah, we got some money. Let's go ahead and do it. When you actually know whether you do or don't, that's a whole different thing. And so that fiscal accountability made a huge difference and we were able to hire those employees back.
Thank you. Jan Lee.
Me again. Let's see. The city will need to make some hard decisions to address rising operational costs and aging infrastructure to their utility systems. However, the community members are frustrated and many feel they are already paying too much for these services. As city manager, how would you engage the public in this difficult conversation? What steps would you take to clearly explain and navigate this challenge while working towards a responsible and sustainable outcome?
Yeah, it's just such a hard task, isn't it? I mean, we all live in the same environment, the same economy, and you know, the prices continues to go up, and we all struggle. So I am not unsympathetic. The unfortunate thing that I think our communities, and it's not just Ketchikan, around the country, don't always recognize is the direct correlation between the pothole in front of their house that's bothering them and the cost and the equipment that it takes to fix it. And it's on us to be more educational about making sure our citizens understand where's the money going. I'm not telling you that I think I can win all the residents over about the future rate increases we may have to discuss, because I think some of them are going to be concerned. I do think that it's a mistake not to be having those on an incremental basis year to year. Because from my perspective, and this is something we all have to come to an agreement on together. And so I'm not telling you what to do. I will just tell you that philosophically, if there are small changes year to year, just like there are in the price of gas and the price of bread, none of us like rising gas costs, but I know that that's where it's going, right? And so I know when I go to the gas station tomorrow, it may be a penny more than it was yesterday, right? I'm not surprised by that. I may be frustrated about it. I may not like it, but I anticipate that's what it's going to look like tomorrow. Chances that I'm going to pull up to the gas station is going to be 10 cents less are few and none. But the day that happens, I'm excited about it, right? So us helping our citizens understand that's where this trend is going, and we're going to mitigate for it as best as we can. I understand the angst about tourism. Helping citizens understand where the dollar flows from the time that boat pulls into the harbor through our system to mitigate for those impacts is critical. Helping them understand why economic development in our community is so paramount, even though it might change the dynamic of what exists today, because it has the potential to offset those potential impacts is critical. But then helping them understand when we finally get to it and say, we have done everything that we can, we've shown you everything that we have done, and now we're at the point that to keep your toilets flushing and your water flowing and the police responding in time to save your relative or your family member, this is what has to take place. And communicating with them and giving them the opportunity to participate back, they're not going to like it, but at least they will understand why it is the way it is. And that's the only thing we can do.
Thank you. Riley.
Ketchikan is experiencing a significant housing shortage compounded by high construction costs driven by shipping and other local factors. Additionally, city permitting fees and regulatory requirements significantly add further barriers to development. Are you open to reducing permitting costs and streamlining regulations, or potentially offering incentives to encourage new housing construction? Please explain your reasoning and the consideration that would shape your approach.
Sure, absolutely. Great question. I agree 100%. Ketchikan this isn't a Ketchikan problem. It's a national, it's an international problem. I agree. It's the housing affordability and housing availability is becoming a national dilemma that communities all the way across the country are facing. So it's not just you guys. It's something we're all struggling with. And I don't know that anybody has found the silver bullet. Am I willing to consider reduction of fees or incentives that could stimulate development? Absolutely, 100%. As long as we can make sure that that step actually ends up in the pocket of the homeowner or the renter. Does that make sense? What we have found, and historically cities have found around the country, is that sometimes what we think we're doing to mitigate for rising housing costs benefits the developer and not the end user, not the homeowner. So what I would want to do as we contemplate those things is make sure that we can determine if we give the developer a reduced development fee or permit fee or whatever, does that trace back to the homeowner instead of just making the developer a little richer? Because that's what we're trying to accomplish, right? From my perspective, one of the key things about what we do as elected officials and what my accountability to help you do is let's be clear with each other about what is it that we're trying to do. I mean, it's easy for us to say, let's reduce rates, right? Or let's give discounts because we think this. Let's get down to the bottom line. What is it we're trying to accomplish? If we're trying to accomplish more affordability for homeowners or renters, then let's trace the dollar and let's figure out, does what we're trying to do actually end up in that result? If not, is there a different tool that we can use instead? And let's evaluate them all. For example, one of the things that I know the federal government has made available is low-income tax credits, right? That LIHTC program. The whole purpose of that program is to incentivize affordability to renters if the developer will rent restrict a certain percentage of the units that he builds. So we're going to give him a permit to build 20 new units. We're going to allow him to use the LIHTC program if he commits that half those units are going to be available to low to moderate income employees based on the average median income established by the state or by the borough or whatever. If he's willing to do that, absolutely, we'll implement that program. So it's those kinds of things that I'm talking about, making sure that we can get the developer to commit that what we think we're doing actually is going to happen and that the homeowner is going to benefit from it. And don't get me wrong, I have no problem with the development community making money or any business making money. That's capitalism, and that's what we're all about. But when we're using our legislative powers and our government resources to create an outcome, I want to make sure, as sacred as those funds are and those tools are, that we're actually doing what we think we're doing instead of making the developer richer. Yeah.
Jack?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Maury, you addressed this question to some extent in response to a follow-up question from Councilmember Matani. When you spoke about managing competing interests, but in this framing, the question is pretty particular to the relationship between the manager and the council. So imagine you're faced with a situation where the city council is leaning toward a decision that would address their immediate priorities, but your professional assessment shows that a different course of action would better serve the long-term interests of the community and its residents. How would you navigate that situation, and what steps would you take to balance maintaining a positive relationship with the council while still advocating for what you believe is best for the city?
Sure. That is a wonderful question. And from my perspective, it's a really easy question because I don't think it's an issue. I am always going to tell you exactly what I think. If you want somebody that's going to tell you what you want to hear, I'm probably not going to be that guy. I have 30 years of experience. I've got strong opinions about what that experience has taught me that I'm going to share with you. So any situation that we have, I'm going to come to the table and say, based on my experience or based on what our employees have told us, this is what I think the best course of action is going to be. And I am going to help you with that perspective up until the point that you make a vote. And the minute you make a vote that suggests that you want to take a different course of action, my immediate accountability at that point becomes making that decision, whether I agreed or not, the very best decision that you can. And that's who I am. And that's how I mitigate that. We're not going to have an issue about it once you vote, because I'm going to tell you what you should do until you vote. And then what you vote on is what we're going to do. And whether I agree or not doesn't matter anymore. You're the elected body that makes that decision. My responsibility is to do what you say and to make sure the city resources, equipment, and staff are being utilized to fulfill your vision. If the community doesn't like that, they replace you. I don't want to be in a situation where I didn't do what you didn't like and you replace me.
It works for me.
That's pretty much.
And it's in our court, balls in your court.
Anyway, I mean, I learned early on, and I think a lot of city managers get in trouble when they let their personal opinions affect how they do their job after the council makes a vote. I'm very passionate about what we do, and I love community service, and I'm gonna tell you exactly what my heart feels like is the right thing to do. But you get elected for a reason. And once you make a decision and vote as a unanimous body together, we're gonna go make that work as best as we can. Whether I think it's I mean, there may have been something we could have done that would have been more fiscally responsible, that could have got it done faster, that would have been prettier or whatever. None of that matters, because once you decide, we're gonna use every asset we have to make that the very best decision for Ketchikan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
As you're aware, general government KPU, for the most part, have separate staff and budget. There are situations which departments from these two areas have to coordinate on projects and may have different priorities on approaches. How do you go about establishing priorities when those departments or staff involved may have opposing viewpoints? How do you promote and encourage a healthy work environment while ensuring positive outcomes?
One Ketchikan, one team. I mean, all of our departments are gonna have competing interests and they should. The fire chief should think his people, his equipment, his area of accountability is more important than anything else in the community. So should the communications department, so should the public works department. Every one of those people, I hope and expect, will be wildly passionate about their accountability. But just like I told you, after they presented to me what their accountability is, when we decide as an administrative staff what we think is the right thing to do, I'm gonna expect all of them to get on board and support it, just like I'm gonna support what you tell me, right? And that's just how we do business. And we're all gonna support each other. We're all gonna be excited about it. They're gonna have had the opportunity to express why their project or their this or that is more important. And at the end of the day, when we finally say, heard you, totally understand it, but because of what the community said, what the council has said, or what I know that you don't know, this is what we're gonna do instead. So let's get on board. And we're gonna get on board, and we're all gonna go do it, and we're gonna support each other, and we're gonna celebrate, and it's gonna be great. And I'm not telling you that at some point the fire chief isn't gonna think that we, missed the boat and didn't do something that he thought was important, or the same thing with public works, but I'm gonna expect that we're all gonna get on board and support each other, just like I'm gonna get on and support you, even though maybe I thought you should have done something different.
Thank you. Judy.
Okay, I get a great one. So I'm gonna offer a scenario. A major infrastructure failure occurs in the city-owned utility, water outage or electrical disruption. The failure impacts several neighborhoods. You see that the community frustration is growing quickly and council members are receiving complaints and demanding immediate updates. That's so true. At the same time, your division manager advises you that providing too much early information could create confusion or liability. How do you approach such an event?
I'll give you, I don't know, my honest opinion is there's no such thing as too much information too early. I told you about that master plan community we developed. We had a strong policy. No one tells our story before we do. Other people can respond to our story if they want, but we're going to tell our story because no one tells our story better than we do. Citizens deserve frequent, consistent, ongoing communication, especially in times of crisis. If we don't communicate, they're going to worry. They're going to second guess. They're going to be paranoid. They're going to call you. So, of course, do we have to be careful about what we communicate and how we communicate? Sure. But to stand up in front of our citizens and say, I can't tell you everything, but here's what we know. Here's what we're going to do. So I don't know exactly what all the communication infrastructure looks like. It seems to me from what I've heard, you're incredibly well connected, especially for a community this size. I think from what I know already, we have the capability to be better at communicating than anybody else. We just have to be committed to doing it. I'm not afraid stand up in front of the community in any instance and say, here's what we know and here's what we're gonna do, and we'll be consistent. In a situation like what you're talking about, there may be times when we have to go door to door. We may have to say, look, here's what we're doing. We're gonna send some people out. We're getting to it. We may have to post flyers. We may have to send emails. We may have to do emergency broadcasts. We may have to do social media posts, YouTube content, whatever. We will utilize every channel we have to make sure that our community, our citizens understand, and we'll make sure you're in the loop first so that you can communicate back to them and don't feel like you're in the dark. I mean, I want you to feel like you're the experts as much as we are, because they're gonna come to you in many instances before they come to us, so.
Great answer, thank you.
Abby?
As city manager, how would you approach building and sustaining long-term economic prosperity for the community? What role do you see the city organization playing in supporting local businesses and attracting new investment? And there was an added question. What measures would you undertake to help elevate median income levels of Ketchikan residents?
Economic development is the lifeblood of any community. A lot of my career has focused on economic development because I feel like it is so critically important to the long-term sustainability of the community. Just a couple of quick examples. There were instances of some of the communities that I had worked for where development wanted to take place. There was a big shopco that wanted to come to the first community that I worked for. City council, before I was the city manager, voted not to approve that, not to allow that to happen because they wanted to protect their downtown. All that did was shift the economic impact because that shopco went to the adjacent community, which then became the commercial epicenter instead of ours. So all the impacts we still had. We still had all the traffic, all the same impacts, and all the benefits went here instead. So I have always been a strong proponent of making sure we understand exactly what our economic opportunity is and that we are focused heavily on, first of all, what can we do to prop up and sustain the existing businesses that already exist? Do they need help from us? Are there things that we're currently doing that make it more difficult than it needs to be for them to be successful? Secondly, are there things that we can do to help them grow or expand? Are we helping them advertise and connect with the broader market to make sure that they're successful? Thirdly, what types of economic opportunities exist that we can capitalize on right now to expand what already exists? And fourth, are there other outside economic opportunities that maybe we haven't considered that we can bring into our community? So I look, for example, at all the incredible assets that we have in the connection with the tourism. And none of this may make sense, but from the day that we started talking about me coming here to talk to you, I began to think, how can we capitalize on the tourism that exists to make sure that the existing businesses capitalize on that 100%, and we capture as much of the dollars that those tourists have at their disposal to spend right here in Ketchikan. Are there things that we could do with the mall? Are there things that we can do with the native culture to make sure that we're celebrating and that people see when they come to town what those opportunities are, the crafts that they make, the things that can be sold, the stores that we have, the restaurants that we have. Anyway, I think it's critically important. And I think thinking in terms of how do we create more types of job opportunities that have the potential to elevate the income levels of our community is incredibly important. Some of that's going to come down to training. Some of that's going to come down to the types of jobs that we have. Some of that's going to come down to, can we partner with the local universities in the state to create training opportunities for younger people as they're entering the labor field? But to me, that is not a third party's objective or accountability. That's ours. And I'm highly focused on it and think it is something that we should be intimately involved in every day. And how do we strengthen and stabilize our local economy? That.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jay?
What do you view as the role of the city council in dealing with the city manager, general manager, and the administration department heads?
So just philosophically, right? The city manager of government was created to allow you to focus on legislation and for the manager and the staff to focus on administration. That was kind of the division, right? Now, this, in larger communities, that becomes much easier because frankly, you just don't have time. Elected officials don't have time to get into the weeds on what a police department with 500 police officers is doing with money and staffing and equipment day to day, right? In smaller communities, that line becomes a little more difficult because it's easy. You're closer to the public. You're closer to the people. You're closer to the issues. You feel it and you hear about it. So somehow we have to determine together, what does that relationship look like that makes sense for you so that you can be involved at a level that's appropriate and that works for us too. I am going to be, my accountability will be to help us both understand when maybe your involvement might be detrimental to us and detrimental to you in a way that's productive, and then for us to find a way to balance that. And I think we could do that. When you all tell me that you want to be involved, I want to find a way to help you be involved. When I tell you that the level to which you're involved or the way that you're being involved affects our productivity or our staff morality, I would hope that you would respect that and understand that and help me find a way to balance for that too. And I think that's how we negotiate that, right? I want to be able to hear you tell me, well, Keith, I want to be involved in this because it's important to me. And I want you to be able to hear me say, I hear you and that's great. And I want to support you. Can you be involved this way instead of that way? Does that make sense? And I think if we're open with each other, we'll find that balance. This isn't going to be a battle. I promise you it's not. I mean, I know why you're engaged and why you're passionate, and we can find a way to make that work in a way that works for staff and that works for you too. It's just easy. We just have to be transparent and honest with each other about what we need and what we want.
Thank you. So, Keith, do you have any questions for the council?
I do. Just a couple. You know, I know from this process that some of you were concerned about the pool of candidates. I know that some of the concerns were, is there a way to have local people involved in this process? And I sympathize with that. I guess I'd like to have just a brief conversation with you about what those feelings are and how we approach that. Do you feel like I have the kind of skills that mitigate for that? Because I think your concerns and your worries are heartfelt, and I appreciate that. And I would, although I desperately want to work for Ketchikan, and my wife and I came here because we love this community and we think we could do an incredible job here and we would love it here. I also want you to make the decision that's best for you. And I want us to be honest with each other about why you're concerned about the candidate pool, and if those concerns are becoming resolved as we've talked, or if you still have outstanding worries. I mean, I'd be curious what you think about that.
Anybody have anything? Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Let's see. If I ever start to dive into one of these areas you're not, someone just shout at me or something.
Just
But,
smack you.
so you are correct. A lot of us really have concerns about hiring from outside, and it's for good reason.
Sure.
Community-wide, we've seen a number of very high up positions where people were brought in from all over the world, where in some cases it just didn't work, and in some cases it was an absolute community disaster. So I appreciate you putting that out there because it is a concern we have. And I think, speaking for myself, we don't want to be doing this again in 2 years.
Amen.
And so what we really hope is that the person that gets hired is going to be all in. Other people have differing opinions on this too. Some people would like to see someone who's really involved in the community. Me personally, I don't really care what you do on your personal time, but we just want somebody that's going to stick around for the long haul. So I think that's a great concern. And I appreciate you bringing it up, though. It's kind of the white elephant in the room. So
Yeah, and I don't want it to be. I mean, I just to reassure you, I'm a drink the Kool-Aid kind of guy. I mean, we've already drunk the Ketchikan Kool-Aid, and we are 100% in. And I totally mean that. I'm not just saying that for this interview. My wife was born and raised in Utah, and she's right here in the room. You can ask her. She's been really nervous about Alaska. Oh my gosh, are you serious? Are we going to Alaska? We have been very, very careful, thoughtful, prayerful about what are we doing and is this the right thing to do? And I mean, we pledge to you that we're not casual about this decision, that we are highly committed to you, to the community, and that we're pledging our hearts and our souls and our experience and our knowledge and everything that we are to become Ketchikan residents, to help you with the issues that are important to you and to become members of the community that are passionate about those concerns too.
Thank you.
Ken Lee.
I think one of the concerns as a, I'm born and raised here, sixth generation.
Yeah.
And a lot of concerns in our community is we are a diverse community. We are Native. We have a very active Native community. I don't want to see us drawing a line because they are just as, I want to know that as our manager, that you understand everyone in our community is a viable source, from our Native, our LGBTQ community to our disabled community, and our elder community. Sometimes I think we forget that as a whole, we are all economic drivers, that we all provide and contribute to our community. We have staff in all of those, and I'm missing some, I'm sure. There's a list. We passed an anti-discrimination ordinance. We're one of 3 in the state, adding in the LGBTQ community, and shoring up anti-discrimination ordinances for all the other minority groups. So I mean, and that's where I get a little, yes, extremely.
I feel that, and I agree. I mean, it baffles me a little bit that in America we're still having this debate, right? Because we came to America to have freedom of religion, freedom to feel and express ourselves the way we wanted to. So the fact that we're still debating this is really astonishing. I feel our accountability as elected officials and as city representatives is to represent the entire community that we live in, right? I'm always discouraged that sometimes the people that speak the loudest are the people that get hurt the most, and they're not necessarily always representative of the whole community. Sometimes the quiet minority really have the issues that are the most critical to the community, and we have to listen to all of those and find ways to incorporate their input into our decision making, and that's on us. How do we reach out and make sure that our efforts represent a collection of all the community and all the feedback? It's easy just to say, well, we sampled the community, we got a response. Well, did you? Did you really? Have you heard from everybody? What steps have you taken to make sure you've heard from everybody? So I agree, and I sympathize with that, and I support 100%. I think it shouldn't be a question. I'm sorry that it is, but I promise you, I am that person too. My wife grew up in Utah her whole life. I did not. My father was an FBI agent. We moved around. So I was born in Minnesota. I lived in Florida, Louisiana. I grew up in Oklahoma and Washington, D.C. So I learned Native American history all through Oklahoma growing up, and very, very passionate about supporting those Native cultures and making sure those voices are heard. I grew up in D.C. where I was the minority. And so I think it's important to understand that perspective too. So yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Ketchikan is very proactive in hiring. We in the process that we had here, we want to make sure that anybody in the community that had an interest had the ability to apply and have fair consideration, which we did. And then I know the council here is always, this is one of the bigger things we do is hire a manager.
Of course it is.
Yeah. And we know as we go through this budget session, it's not just about the budget, it's about our employees, it's about the services that we provide. That's all we provide is services.
Yeah.
And we want to do that well. And so then we look at the experience, the education, the ability to fill this job. But we want to make sure that we're completely fair and open about it as we do. The process has been really good, I think. And we certainly appreciate your interest, right? So again, this is not just about us, this is about the community. So we take that to heart when we go into these processes.
No, you should. I respect that. I really do, Mayor. I think that's, your focus is heartfelt and it's sincere and it's spot on. It's a privilege for me to be allowed to be involved in a process where you should be considering local people first. And I honor that. I feel like it's exceptional that I am being allowed to be considered in your community when I'm an outsider. And so it's a privilege for me to be able to sit down with you and talk about my thoughts and for us to negotiate with each other. Does my outsider experience align with yours and allow me to contribute in a way that's powerful and meaningful? And I would hope that from my perspective that turns out in my favor, but I would totally honor and respect if it doesn't, because your culture, your perspective, your values are different than my experience, and that maybe somebody better would contribute. I totally respect that. Your heart is in exactly the right place, and it's just a privilege for me to be included. I'll tell you that we're passionate about Ketchikan. My wife and I want us to be successful. We want to be part of your community. I firmly believe that my career experience aligns with the problems and the issues that you're passionate about and you're worried about. I think we would be incredible residents, and I pledge my heart, my soul to you. Now it's up to you, and I'll respect your decision, and we'll be great friends regardless.
So
And we're still going to come up and have you teach us how to fish for salmon.
So as you look at this council, you look around the room and you look around the staff in the city, there's a large portion of those that were outsiders at one point.
Yeah.
Coming from the outside, not necessarily outsiders, but transplanting to Ketchikan.
Yeah.
And ended up loving it and staying here. And we certainly appreciate that. So we have no qualms about hiring somebody outside that's qualified and wants to move to this community. Thank you. Anything else?
Well, I guess another question, just, we've talked a lot about concerns and worries, and strategies and objectives. I guess I just would be curious, what's the biggest thing that you're hoping the city manager can help you resolve? Like if I start on Monday, what's the thing you're going to hope that person walks into the office that can help you take care of?
Well, I think outside assessment, somebody coming in with new eyes and looking at what we're doing, understanding and I don't think that we're the only community that are having problems with their budgets, their revenue, especially isolated communities like we have here. But you help us come up with a plan, and it's going to be a joint venture to get there, right? And it's going to be a long-term plan because we didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to get out of it.
Right.
And there's, like you said, in all these situations, there's some tough decisions that need to be made. We got to know what the needs are, and then listen to what the wants are. But really, we got to make sure that we cover the needs first. So, I think right.
Well, broadly would be the budget, but more specifically, I was actually happy to hear you bring up earlier something that a lot of us are very passionate about, which is figuring out one way or another, and it may involve someone with a different perspective, some new ideas, but figuring out more ways to get those tourism dollars, one, into our businesses, but two, to pay for all of our different utilities and services that they use that are struggling to pay the bills.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing community-wide that we hear from people all the time. They feel that the money's coming in and going out, and although that's not totally true, I think there's room to capture more.
Yeah.
Both on the government side and in the
Always.
private sector.
Yeah.
So I was happy to hear you bring that up, and if you were to get hired, I'd love to see some creativity and ways to go about it.
I would too. No, and actually, as I was talking with some of the people in the different meetings that we had, that was kind of one of the ideas that I had is, how do we begin to do that? Completely different example, but kind of similar. Provo City, where I worked, some of you have heard me say this, 52% of the property in Provo doesn't pay property tax. Because it's privately owned property, whether it's Brigham Young University, which is a private institution, so they don't pay property taxes. There's other government facilities or whatever. BYU is an incredible asset in our community. I don't think we have pushed them as much as we could or should to say, we love the fact that you're here and we want you here and we want you to be successful, but here are the impacts that we feel because you're here. And we want you as a partner helping us mitigate those and manage those. And so I think that's a fair question to have with the cruise industry, right? Is we're not griping. We're glad you're here. We love the fact that you're here. We want you to bring more, but here's the pain we feel. Here's the things that we think you could help us address, or how could you help us partner in potential solutions? Because I don't know that I have all the answers, but I think it's a very great question that we ought to be willing to at least broach with them and talk about how do we make you, are there things that you'd be willing to sponsor? You know, could we put, you know, your cruise line on this facility if you're willing to contribute to helping us do that, or what, I don't know. But I mean, to just be engaged more in creative solutions so that they feel like they are true community partners, and helping our citizens see how they participated back to stabilize the community is really important.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I don't think so. We could talk all day and I know you're busy and it's a Saturday. I just want to share with you, how privileged we have felt to be part of your process. I've never in my career been through an interview process like this. It's been very unique. And it frankly, it's maybe not how I would have outlined it, but I'm thrilled you did what you did because it gave us exposure to your people and your community in a way that I wouldn't have any other way. And I'm just really grateful for it. Your staff, from every single person that we met, were incredible. I had many of them pass their cell phone numbers off to me and say if there was anything that we needed while we were here to let them know. It was just wonderful. So your community is beautiful. Your people are incredible. Your city employees are wonderful. The problems that you have are problems that I'd love to help you work with. I appreciate your time and I hope that we can work together to be an incredible experience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have,
Can I shake hands?
you may.
It's a
Thank you,
pleasure.
sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks for taking your time. Thank you. Thanks for bringing us up here. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, take care.
Can we take another break?
It's a lunch thing.
Yeah.
What?
We'll say lunch.
You can sit there
It
and
is
eat
1
it.
o'clock. We gotta.
You can sit there and.
So at this point, we do have an executive session scheduled. Jeff?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. Really appreciate the opportunity for, and dedicating so much of your day towards these important discussions that we have. If you would like to have a break, and then we're scheduled to have an executive session really to gain your observations, your insight to the interview process, and then seek any direction you might have.
Sounds good. So we can have the motion first. Yes.
Your Honor, I move the City Council declare consistent with the Acting Assistant City Manager's memorandum dated December 8th, 2025. It is in the best interest of the City Council to review and discuss finalist candidates Stephen Dahl and Keith Murray for the vacant City Manager, General Manager position in executive session in accordance with KMC 2.04.025A1 and 2, which may involve matters the immediate knowledge of which would clearly have an adverse effect upon the finances of the city, and discussion of subjects that tend to prejudice the reputation and character of any person, provided the person may request a public discussion.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Zingy,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Matani.
Yeah.
Gas,
Yes.
Finnegan.
Yes.
Bradbury,
Yes.
Gage.
Yes.
All right, we'll take a short break before we go in, and if there's food available, we work with
We
doing
can
that.
just put it in there.
Yeah, just put it in there. It'll be fine.
Thank you.
All right. All right, we'll come back to order after executive session. We met in executive and had discussions. Do we have a motion?
Your Honor, I
Yes.
move the city council offer the position of city manager / general manager to Keith Moray and authorize Strategic Government Resources, Inc. to negotiate an employment contract on behalf of the city.
Second.
And has moved and been seconded. Any discussion? So, this was a long and, fruitful, I think, process, what we went through. It was fairly extensive. It was said we started out with, 42? We finally got it down to where we have a final candidate. And through the resumes, the interviews, the public interview, and then this final interview here, the council weighed all the comments and answers and made a decision based on what they feel is the best fit for the community of Ketchikan. And so with that, we did make the motion as we have it here today. Is there any other further comments or discussion from council members? With that, would you please call the roll?
Bradbury,
Yes.
Gage,
Yes.
Zingy,
Yes.
Coos,
Yes.
Matani,
No.
Gas,
Yes.
Finnegan.
Yes.
That passes, Your Honor, 6-1.
So with that, Jeff, do you want to come up and put them on speakerphone and make a? We'll just
Oh,
call.
you're just gonna put them
Can you
on.
call?
Oh, you probably want to do that after.
Okay, perfect. We can do that.
Thank
So-
you. No, it's great. However, I should know the candidates are standing by, so that.
Okay, so with that, we will move forward with the, working with our contractor and staff to, start negotiations in regards to, bringing Keith on board, so. Is there any other items on our agenda? So, we would certainly like to thank everybody that applied for this position. They're all worthy of their application. And I would especially like to thank Steve Dahl for his participation in this process and coming to Ketchikan and having the opportunity to meet him. And look forward to moving the city forward. So with that, we have another motion.
Adjourn.
Are there anybody opposed? Hearing and seeing none,